I broke up with my boyfriend on his birthday because he revealed disgusting secrets about himself to me. I had just started dating Thomas and things seemed promising. After 7 weeks of dating, he invited me and two of his childhood friends, Alex and Bart, for a 29th birthday celebration weekend at his father's country house in a small French town. His father was going to be around as well and I was very excited to meet everyone. We arrived at the country house and after a few hours and lots of drinks, a group of people gathered around a small campfire and started sharing childhood memories. This is where things go wrong. At first, of course, innocent and dumb stories as you would expect, but then, Thomas and his friends started sharing really sick stuff. In particular, they told a story about how, when they were 17 years old, they found it very amusing to bully Arthur, a 14-year boy at their school who was autistic. They made his life hell verbally and physically. As if this was not enough, they created a fake girl profile on MSN Messenger and spent effing months exchanging messages with him under the false girl identity, flirting and developing a false relationship with the poor boy. Some people were in on it at school and it became a big and cruel joke behind Arthur's back. They used pictures of Bart's real cousin and the boy truly thought he had some kind of online girlfriend to whom he even sent confessions and love messages. At some point they got bored and scheduled a false rendezvous in real life, asking the boy to take a bus for 3 hours, wearing dumb clothing. Obviously there was no one waiting for him and they did not know how long he waited over there, by himself. If Arthur had not already understood what was going on, he found out the next day at school after Thomas and Bart told the story to everyone and even shared the love messages that Arthur had been writing. The poor boy stopped coming to class and ended up taking his life. Do you think that Thomas, Alex and Bart had any bit of shame about it? Not a bit of remorse, in particular on Thomas and Bart's side. They kept making jokes about it and even seemed to regret that they were not good enough at being evil to convince the boy to send explicit pics. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if he had done so. To say that I felt uncomfortable would be a gross understatement. I was absolutely horrified and started to despise Thomas more than anything. I was not the only one shocked. Thomas' father, who heard the end of the story, had the most disappointed look in his eyes. His stupid son was so intoxicated that he did not even notice it. I escaped the party immediately after that and got back to the house. I could not sleep at all tonight and I kept thinking about the evening and how Thomas was still finding this funny. I heard him coming to bed around 4 a.m. but I pretended I was asleep. I could feel him trying to have intimacy with me, but he lacked the energy and passed out himself. The next day was the actual birthday, and the initial plan was that I would take Thomas on a one-on-one fancy surprise date for lunch nearby and then we would meet the group for a late afternoon party. But instead, I woke up very early on Sunday morning, took all my stuff in silence and went alone to the train station where I took a direct train heading back home. I decided to send a text to Thomas wishing him happy birthday and telling him to meet me at a certain location 1 hour from the house for a surprise and that I needed to go a little bit in advance to make sure that everything would be perfect. I had picked the location randomly, using Google Maps, to gain time. Thomas read the text. He responded with excitement that he would follow the instructions religiously. When he arrived there at 12:30, I told him to wait further as there was little delay on something. Then I asked him to meet me at a restaurant which was a 30-minute drive from the initial location. When he arrived at 13:15, I texted him that I was on my way, would arrive in 20 minutes and that he would understand when he saw me why I made him wait. I also asked him to order some food and the most expensive bottle on the menu. Around 13:30 he started calling me several times and sent a lot of worried texts, and after 45 minutes I responded, "So, how does it feel to have people play with your feelings?" Then I stopped responding. I let him call and text the entire afternoon, but never responded. At some point an unknown number called me. It was his friend Alex asking what was going on and that Thomas' birthday was completely ruined because of what I did. I just responded, "This is an extremely small payback for what you did to Arthur. Tell Thomas to stop calling me," and hung up. I blocked them. The following days, a common friend called me to say that my reaction was completely absurd and unfair, that it was not my role to punish someone for actions they did as a teenager, that they were adult ways of saying things and that I had been completely crazy. Thomas tried to fix things and win me back for a few months afterwards. I never responded to any of his messages.
What are some very creepy facts? If you get a blood transfusion and get the wrong type of blood, one of the symptoms is a sense of impending doom. When creating the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, they couldn't create skeletons that looked realistic enough, so they used real human skeletons. They've since removed all of them except 1. Crocodiles can gallop like a horse. There's a parasite that enters a fish's mouth, eats the tongue and replaces itself as the fish's new tongue. Tarantulas can swim. Humans' eyes don't reflect light at night like animals do. I like to say this fact to my wife at a campfire. If you live to age 70 you will have shed around 105 pounds of skin.
Why do you no longer talk to your parents? When I was 17 years old I found out my parents were actually my grandparents. Apparently my mom had me when she was 13 because she was frequently having intimacy with her stepbrother, who at the time was 18. When my grandparents found out they were deeply disturbed and upset. At first they wanted my mom to give me up for adoption and put my dad in jail. But she worked up a deal with my grandparents. She was going to give birth to me, leave me with them, and leave the state with my father. So, that is exactly what she did. When I was about 12 years old, she and my dad came back to see me. My grandparents told me she and my dad were my second cousins who were visiting from Maryland. I believed them and spent the best 2 weeks of my life with my parents. I built a great bond with my father in those 2 weeks, and every year during the summer since I was 12, he's visited me. Until my 17th birthday. My parents came to visit us again, But this time to surprise me with an awesome gift for my 17th birthday. They gave me a German Shepherd. He was the cutest dog I've ever seen. After the dog, my mom gave me a card. I opened it and it revealed that the people who I thought were parents were actually my grandparents and the people who I thought were my second cousins were my actual real parents. My entire life has been a lie. I was so upset when they told me this. I took my new dog, ran into my room, and locked myself in there for 2 days. Eventually I came out of my room to tell my grandparents that I was no longer going to be living with them and that I would like to never speak to them or my real parents again. It has been 5 years and I've forgiven my grandparents. I have not spoken to my real parents since that incident. My grandpa told me that they got married and had 3 more kids.
What is the most inappropriate gift that someone innocently gave a teacher? My daughter went to private school in elementary school. There was one teacher whom every student wanted to have for first grade. She was an extremely excellent teacher. Well, one year, this teacher asked for a raise because she had been at the school for 5 years and she was a very popular teacher among students and teachers alike. The head of the school turned down her request and as a result, she left the school to work in the public school system. Well, as wonderful as she was in the private school, she was equally popular in the public school. She cared about each and every student in her class. One particular female student truly adored this teacher and decided to bring her a present every day. This present was a pretty white rock. The teacher put the rocks one next to the other around the perimeter of her desk. Pretty soon, the teacher had to make a second row of these pretty rocks. But they were pretty and she wanted to honor the students, so there they sat on her desk. One day, the school invited the local police to visit with the students in their classrooms. Just a basic, "Hi, we are your friends. If you ever need help, don't be afraid to ask a police officer because we are here to help you." Then they allowed the students to ask questions. After 10 minutes of answering questions, it was time for the students to go outside for recess. Once the students were outside, one of the policemen pulled the teacher aside and asked her about her rock collection. The teacher innocently replied, "They are pretty, aren't they? One of my students brings me one every day for a gift." The policeman said, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to point out who this child is and I will have to confiscate all your rocks." The teacher looked at him perplexed about what the problem might be, so the policeman explained that those pretty white rocks were crack cocaine.
My brother is marrying my high school bully. She claims she doesn't remember me, but I don't believe her. When I was in high school, I had a friend named Annika. We were close until one day, I found out she had been telling lies about me behind my back. I was hurt and angry, and I decided to end our friendship. But she didn't stop there. She kept spreading more lies about me, and made me feel miserable for the rest of high school. I was so glad when we graduated and went our separate ways. Years later, my brother Carter told me he had gotten engaged to his girlfriend. I was happy for him, but I was also curious about who she was. He said he would introduce her to me at a family party. The day of the party came, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw who walked in with Carter. It was Annika. She looked different, but I recognized her right away. I felt a wave of nausea and anger wash over me. How could Carter do this to me? How could he marry the person who made my life hell? Carter noticed my reaction and pulled me aside. He said he had met Annika at a party and fell in love with her. He didn't know who she was until later, when he learned her full name. He confronted her about what she had done to me, but she said she didn't remember me or anything she had done. He believed her and decided to give her a chance. He asked me to be nice to her and to let go of the past. I didn't know what to say. I felt betrayed by my brother and disgusted by Annika. I told him I needed some time to think. I went back to the party, but I avoided Annika. I didn't say anything to her or look at her. She did the same to me. But then, one of my aunts asked me how I felt about my brother's engagement. I tried to change the topic, but she kept pushing. I finally lost it and said something like, "I don't feel good about it at all, because his fiancé was a bully who hurt me and never said sorry." Everyone heard me and turned to look at Annika. She burst into tears and ran out of the room. Carter followed her, and they left soon after. The rest of the night was a mess, because everyone wanted to know what happened, I told them. Later, Carter called me and said I was a bad person for making Annika cry and for holding a grudge over something that happened a long time ago. He wanted me to apologize to her. I refused and said he was the bad one for not telling me sooner and for choosing her over me. He said she didn't remember, and she couldn't apologize for something she didn't remember, but I didn't buy it. I hung up on him. I know I was honest and I had a right to be upset. But maybe I was too harsh and I should have been more understanding. Maybe people can change and forget their mistakes. Maybe I should try to make peace with my brother and his fiancée. AITA?
What's your family's disturbing secret? The only thing that was unusual about my family was that my parents always tied and locked my sister in her bedroom every night. They always told me not to question my elders, so I never asked. My parents were going out for my dad's birthday party in San Francisco and trusted me enough to not get a babysitter and to follow the same routine for my sister. "Now honey, remember to tie her to bed before 9:30 p.m. and lock the door," my mother said to me before following my father out the door. Then she turned to me with a straight face, "And do not, I repeat, do not unlock that bedroom no matter what. Call us on the phone in the living room if there is an emergency." I turned the lock to the main door and then looked at my sister. The clock read 4:45 p.m. Only 5 more hours. Once the clock hit 9:25, I told my sister to go brush her teeth and head to bed. Once she told me she was in bed, I ran upstairs to tie her to the bed. When I went into her room, I froze. All the walls were scratched up, the windows nailed shut,
And all the furniture was gone. Except her bed. Just a single bed in the middle of a room. Of course this shocked me because I've never gone into her room before. Okay Ally, go ahead and lay down. I told my sister. She laid down and I tied her up. How the hell could she possibly be comfortable? I left her room after but did not lock the door. I wanted to see if anything really happened. I went to my room shortly after and watched some TV to pass the time. Around 11 p.m., I started hearing growling. I brushed it off as it could have been my Rottweiler, Peanut, growling at someone walking past our front door. Then 12 o'clock a.m. hit. The growling grew louder and then I heard a door open. My sister's bedroom door. What the F was she doing, walking around 12 in the morning? I could hear her go downstairs and that's when the growling stopped. Everything went silent. Then I could hear Peanut start whining. I got up from my bed. And slowly opened my door. As I was walking down the stairs, I noticed a trail of blood go from the living room to the kitchen. Right next to the end of the stairs was the archway to the kitchen. I peeked my head into the archway to see Allison eating something. Allison, what are? I stopped dead sentence as Allison turned around for me to see Peanut in her hands and mouth. She unalived him. And she was eating it. I ran upstairs and locked myself in my room. I grabbed my cell phone and hid under the bed. I called my parents' phone and waited for them to pick up. I called 6 times and got no response. I was out of luck, then my phone buzzed. A random number? Hello? I asked. Oh God honey, I'm so sorry. Both of our phones were dead. What wrong? My mom responded, Mom, I forgot to lock the door and now Allison was just eating Peanut. What do I do? I asked. My God Blake. I knew you were too stupid. I want you to run to one of the bathrooms in the house and start running any faucet. My mom responded, wait, why? I asked. Just do it. My mom said. Now she had a deep, horrifying voice. Okay, sorry Mom. But when will you be back? Well, San Diego isn't far from home, so about a couple of minutes. My mom said, San Diego? I thought it was San Francisco. Maybe they just changed plans. Okay, love you, please hurry. I hung up. I ran to the closest bathroom, which was the one in the study room, right next to the living room. Lucky Allison wasn't there. I ran the tub and the sink and just waited. That's when I heard someone walking towards the door. Who's there? I said. Blake? Blake, it's Mommy, you can come out now. Everything is safe. Oh, thank God it was my mom. I was going up to unlock the door. Then the living room cell began to ring. It went to voicemail and that was when I heard my mom on the phone. Hey Blake, it's Mom. Sorry I didn't get your call, I lost my phone. Me and your father are leaving San Francisco now. It'll take a couple of hours, so please follow these rules. 1. Don't pick up any unknown numbers, Ally can trick you. 2. Don't make any noise, especially through the pipes, she can hear pretty clearly. 3. Lastly, do not listen to any voices, they aren't us. The message ended. Fortunately, I didn't open the door yet. Blake opened the door now. I could hear what must have been Allison but sounded demonic. She banged on the door for hours and all I did was sit down near the door and waited, crying and sitting in my own pee. That's when I heard a huge gunshot. It rung in my ears. The door opened and there was my parents. I hugged them tightly and said I was so sorry. They didn't say anything but just cried. Mommy, Daddy, what happened to Ally? I asked. We have no clue. Even a medical team couldn't come up with an answer. My dad said. It started when she was around 5, she would just bite us, then it turned into eating animals. Then around 7 she tried to unalive us. We didn't want to scare you so we didn't tell you. I'm so sorry honey. My mom explained. Well, we have to make this look like an accident, my dad said. We all cleaned up the scene and made it look like a suicide. We also wrote a letter about how Ally felt pressured and wanted to end it because of it. Everyone believed it and now that's a little family secret.
What did you find while snooping that you wish you had never found? 7 years ago, I met my 29-year-old boyfriend. I was 21 years old at the time. I still believe it was love at first sight, even though he had another date on the first night we met and I visited his place with my then boyfriend. My sister dated his friend, and on our way home that night, my sister's boyfriend asked me what I thought about his friend. The naive, 21-year-old me jokingly replied that I was in love with the chubby one. Word must have gotten out because shortly after that, he started pursuing me. Within less than a week or two, we went on a date, and my then boyfriend and the idea of him was out of the window. I was madly in love with the chubby one. He was an extremely smooth talker and knew what to say and when to say it. I enjoyed his company because he was more mature than my ex-boyfriend. We could talk about anything and everything. He was an experienced kisser, and it was not long before he seduced me into sleeping with him. I was gone, hook, line and sinker, madly in love. I was still studying at the time, and since he was self-employed, I would bunk classes to spend some days with him during the week. On weekends, I would sleep over. I enjoyed the fact that my new boyfriend was older and working. I enjoyed playing house, making food, cleaning here and snooping there. One Saturday morning, while he went to see a client, I found myself cleaning and snooping in his cupboard. I wanted to give him a call and tell him that he forgot his wallet at home, but next to his wallet was his green, barcoded identity document. I excitedly opened the ID to take a look at his face and man, was he handsome. Before I could close his ID, something caught my attention. His identity number started with 721,129, meaning he was born on November 29, 1972, which would make him 38 years of age. Why would he own a fake ID if he is already of age? How is this possible? Perhaps he is a criminal with more than one identification document or passport? I frankly searched the rest of the cupboard for answers but found none. Until, eventually, I had a light bulb moment. My loving boyfriend of 2 months lied. My loving boyfriend is 38 years old. I was furious. I felt betrayed. I desperately phoned my best friend to inform her that I am, in fact, sleeping with a much older man. We were in the experimenting phase, and somehow my friend found this hilarious. I had no idea how I was going to tell my parents that my new boyfriend was 17 years older than me. My world came tumbling down. I kept my cool and waited him out. He returned as charming as ever. Only when he thanked me for cleaning his cupboard did he realize that I might know the truth. I showed him the ID, tears in my eyes. I asked him why. He looked flabbergasted and said he could explain. I said that I did not want an explanation, but deep down I just wanted him to tell me that he was really 29 years old, and the ID I found was a bad joke. Instead, he told me that he was 38 years old. He explained that he had liked me ever since he had met me, and he knew that if I knew his real age, I would never considered being with him. I really did like him from the beginning as well, so it wasn't all that hard for me to believe this. I told him I would not be able to trust him again, but we can remain friends. He started crying. I know, I made a 38-year-old man cry, and he begged me to reconsider. I left extremely sad and told my parents, sister, and friends about the incident. Most of them could not believe it. Since he appeared so young of heart and his genes were clearly counting in his favor, he looked better than 29 years of age. 2 days later, he phoned me again, asking me out on an ice cream date. Reluctantly, I said yes. Best decision ever. We spent the night talking, and I remembered why I was in love with him. We clicked in a way that I did not click with anyone else. I was comfortable in myself around him. I forgave him for the lie, and I made him promise to never lie to me again. 7 years later, I completed my studies, got a job, and our first baby is on her way. Guess what? He has not lied to me since.
What's the one substance you've tried and will never touch again? Why? That effed me up proper. A friend of mine used to make it, and we were 4 people in his place and everyone took a turn to smoke it. They laid there for 10 minutes smiling before they woke up. My turn. Just accept the falling I'm told. The walls starting to vibrate in the texture, everything vibrating with kind of a lightning in it. The lines in the palm of my hand glow and vibrate, some kind of inner peace while falling asleep. Then I fall, into a spiral of mostly yellow and purple colors. I keep falling and hearing a voice telling me it's all going to be okay repeatedly in a calm soothing voice, until the voice sounded more and more sinister without changing, like it wants me to die. In the spiral, I start shouting I want out, over and over, while trying to find something to grab onto. I wake up, all the others are on their way out to another room as my friend/anchor told them to leave. Everything vibrates and I feel vibrations and hallucinating. I've coiled myself to my friend so hard it was starting to hurt him. I know he is my friend, but it doesn't look like him. He is green with features resembling Yoda or Gollum, smiling from ear to ear. His face moves from the right to left side of his head while talking to me. In my head, some kind of godlike creature has temporarily manifested itself in him and telling me everything is going to be okay. I'm crying like crazy, yelling I don't want to die. My friend calms me down and the high wears off in a couple of minutes. The whole thing lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, but time is different while high. Feels like maybe an hour or something. The next day is very strange, almost like I'm not there. The feeling of never actually waking up is holding on tight. Over the next couple of months I started experimenting with MDMA. Too much of it. It feels so good, but the downs are bad. I start questioning my existence. I'm starting to think I never woke up. From the DMT trip, I develop agoraphobia, fear of leaving my home. I struggle to differentiate between dreams and reality, and I question reality, thinking about jumping out the window to see if I wake up. Can't sleep, and wake up screaming several times a night. This was 5 years or so ago. I'm still on medication. I can't drink alcohol without being hungover for a week. My social batteries drain very fast. Sometimes, I still question reality. My wife won't talk to me anymore, because I told her not to talk to me anymore. My wife and I have been together for 6 years, married for 2. She used to talk to me all the time. She used to share her day with me, just randomly tell me her thoughts, stuff like that. However, she also used to want to talk about problems we were having. A lot. It felt like we were always talking about what I did wrong. She thought I spent too much time talking to exes. We were friends. I don't prioritize her over work. It's my career. Am I supposed to quit? And mostly that I didn't care enough about her. There were so many different ways that she came to that conclusion. But it was like we were just always sitting down for a serious talk. So, I told her about a year ago that I didn't want to talk anymore. I was just tired of hearing everything I was doing wrong. I provide everything we need, can I just have a break? I told her that if she had a problem with the way I did things then she could get out of my house and we'd get a divorce. She told me that she was trying to communicate because she didn't feel appreciated and that I had one foot out the door. But I think that's ridiculous. I know it's harsh, but I was at my wit's end. So now, a year later, she barely talks to me at all. When I ask about her day, she says fine. When I talk to her about work or politics or my day, she says oh wow. Cool. And walks away. Her attitude isn't bad. She's very sweet, but it's just like she doesn't care anymore. I didn't want to talk about our problems anymore, but I didn't mean stop talking period. We really don't talk about anything that doesn't have to do with our life/household. In the evenings, she just turns on the TV and we watch something until bed. Now I don't know what to do because I just found out today that she won a pretty big award at her job. And she didn't tell me. Last Friday, she said she had to work late and it was cool. I didn't ask. Today, I found out that she was really at a dinner where she was celebrated for this award. She invited some of her friends and her mom and brothers. I ran into her brother at the store today and he mentioned the dinner and said that he was sorry I couldn't make it. I asked what he meant and he said the dinner, how I wasn't able to go because I was sick. I asked him to explain the whole thing to me so now he knows too. What am I supposed to do? Is she punishing me or something? Do I tell her that I know? Why wouldn't she tell me? I didn't think she'd take it this far and now I'm thinking she's being petty. Does anyone have experience here? I love my wife and I'd do anything for her, but I'm so confused. My wife cheated on me with my best friend but their stories are different. I don't know who to believe. My wife Lisa and my best friend Tom used to hang out in a group for years. We were kind of known to be the three musketeers of sorts. Even when Tom eventually found someone of his own to marry, Lisa was best friends with her as well. Lisa and Tom had an extremely close relationship, though, and would often call each other platonic soulmates. One day, Lisa came up to me and told me she didn't feel comfortable being alone with Tom anymore. I asked her why and she didn't tell me at first. For weeks, whenever we had a social gathering with Tom, they'd stare at each other for a while, but would never talk. I thought they just had an argument until one day, Lisa came to sobbing. I listened to her side of the story and then asked Tom his side. There's an issue though, they both have different sides of the story. Lisa says that last weekend, she and Tom were alone listening to music together after his wife went to bed. Lisa said Tom was standing next to her and unexpectedly kissed her on the lips. Lisa said she recoiled and said no, she was with me and he was married to her best friend. Lisa says Tom then took out his schlong and said that they were both free spirits and it was not cheating unless he put it in her kitty. Lisa says she told Tom she was in love with me, laughed it off, he put it away and ended the night with Tom driving her home a while later. Lisa says this was not consensual and she and Tom decided that it would not be a good idea to be alone together in the future. Lisa revealed this to me after Tom was upset with Lisa after not hanging out again a few nights later. Lisa said she was afraid of what Tom might say to me, and me leaving her as a result, and afraid of losing her friendship with Tom's wife. I asked Tom what happened. Tom says they were dancing together. They were close and he kissed her open mouth and felt her breasts. Tom said this went on for a few minutes and nothing more happened. Tom said they stopped because Lisa said it was cheating on both me and his wife. Tom said since he was a free spirit and did not consider what was happening cheating, he wanted to jokingly prove a point that he could even take his schlong out and it still wasn't cheating unless he put it in her kitty. Tom said that the dancing, kissing, honker grabbing was consensual, and they mutually decided to not be alone together again. Tom is afraid of his wife finding out. Tom said he did not tell me because he did not consider anything that happened cheating, but admitted his wife would consider it cheating and would divorce him. Both Lisa and Tom have incentive to minimize or not fully disclose what actually happened for fear of my reaction and said they were fearful of me telling Tom's wife. Lisa is adamant in her version. Tom is adamant in his version. Both do not want me saying anything to Tom's wife. Did something more happen? Who is telling the truth?
I humiliated my overweight brother-in-law. My brother-in-law is overweight. Even my wife told him that it's not healthy, but he doesn't care. He always says I want to try, but it's impossible for me. I have always stayed out of these discussions until now. For Thanksgiving dinner, we visited his house. But he was not looking at his usual self, so I asked him what the problem was. He said that he had attempted to get a date with someone but she did not appear interested in him. The girl said that he's too fat and that she's better off with someone else. It left him depressed but it was his own fault. I asked him, well, what do you want to do about that? And he said, I don't know. I told him, listen, man, the woman was trash but you're risking your health now. He responded by saying that he found it hard to listen. He further said to me, I don't want you lecturing me. Why don't you mind your own effing business? This is my GDDMN house. I instantly lost my temper at that and told him, well, okay. Either wear some baggy clothes or lose some weight, it's your call. He was silent and then asked, what do you mean, baggy clothes? I responded, if your breasts are the problem, that might help. And that's when he went crazy. He began to shout and yell at me. My wife attempted to defuse the situation. He was screaming of how I had disrespected him. I told him that it is his fault and that he couldn't blame me for pointing that out. But in the end, we had to leave the house. I wonder whether I overreacted or did something wrong. I was just fed up at him. I found my husband's Reddit account, and I wish I hadn't. Last night, my husband, 26 male, gave me, 25 female, his phone to put my order in since we were getting Chinese food. We trust each other completely, know each other's passwords, and we both have free access to the other's phone. I never really checked his phone before, so I was caught completely off guard when a message from someone on Reddit popped up while I was browsing the menu. I knew my husband used Reddit, but I didn't know what he was doing on there. My curiosity got the best of me, and I clicked on the message. What I found was a series of intimate back and forths between him and another woman. He was asking her for more photos. If you know what I mean, I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. I looked further and found that my husband was in numerous NSFW groups dedicated to other women's dirty pictures. The woman whose message had caught my eye wasn't the only one he'd been messaging. But the true betrayal came when I stumbled upon his posts in marriage groups. He was lying about our relationship and our 4-year-old daughter. He made one post claiming I don't let him talk to his female best friend who is like a sister, but he doesn't even have a female best friend that I know about. He also lied about our daughter, stating that she often disrespects him and clearly favors her other parent over him. Our daughter's disrespect is usually just saying "duh" after a sentence, something she picked up from him. I'm currently 8 months pregnant with our second child, and I feel numb. I can't believe I missed my husband messaging multiple women behind my back for who knows how long. When I showed him what I'd found, his face turned into a deer in the headlights look. He broke down crying, saying he just does things sometimes and doesn't remember doing them. It was the most ridiculous excuse he could have possibly given, and it felt even more disrespectful that he thought I'd believe he just doesn't remember. I slept in my daughter's room last night, and now he's at work. I know there was no physical cheating involved, but I can't shake the feeling that I can never truly trust him again. If he hid this, what else has he hidden? I feel so alone. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, and I don't know how to move forward. The trust we built over years seems shattered in an instant, all because of a single click on his phone. Assault my friend at a party? I'll just make you disabled. While she was in college, my friend was assaulted by an up-and-coming athlete at a party. Let's call him Mark. Mark didn't rope her but did some pretty bad stuff with his hands. It hurt me seeing her state afterwards, and it was like she was a shell of the person she used to be. She began to flinch whenever someone reached out their hands to her, even if it was her own family. Mark, not knowing that I was friends with her, even bragged around me that he got handsy with her at the party. I was a vaccine administrator with the local health department. In my country, anyone can quickly get certified to administer a vaccine by completing a short course. Vaccines are a marvel of modern science and have saved many lives. However, they need to be administered correctly or they can cause painful and lifelong shoulder injuries. This is called SIRVA, or shoulder injury related to vaccine administration. Basically, a vaccine should be injected at least 2 inches below the very top of the shoulder. If administered too high on the shoulder, the vaccine can enter the shoulder joint and potentially lead to a lifelong injury. This injury can severely restrict the shoulder's range of motion, making even simple tasks like dressing excruciatingly painful. It can be prevented by wearing a t-shirt, rolling up or exposing your entire arm and being in the same position, seated or standing, as the vaccine administrator. Now the entire sporting team had to be vaccinated against the virus to continue playing. Since they were getting their vaccine through the state, and since I had good rapport with my boss, I managed to get myself assigned to that vaccination site. I correctly administered the vaccine to all the athletes, ensuring the injection was at least 2 inches below the top of their shoulders. However, when it was Mark's turn, I deliberately positioned the needle right at the top of his shoulder and injected. Mark didn't play in his next game the following weekend. My friends mentioned he was possibly sick with the virus. But as weeks turned into months, Mark still wasn't back in the game. Rumor had it that Mark mysteriously developed a shoulder issue, preventing him from continuing in athletics. Following this setback, Mark took a job at a supermarket working for minimum wage. It has been a couple of years and I still see Mark working at that supermarket, predominantly using his left arm because his right one is still ruined. I always say hi to him with a nice big slap on the shoulder. I ducked my boyfriend's Jeep without him knowing because he was sad he hadn't got a duck yet. So the title probably sounds really odd, but let me explain. In the Jeep owners community, there is a thing called ducking. The term is, duck duck Jeep. Jeep owners leave a small rubber duck on another Jeep. Ducks are often left with a note, telling the owner they've been ducked and they have to pass the duck along. Jeep owners say it's a source of pride to find one of the ducks on their car. The trend has gained so much popularity lately and is often posted on Facebook groups for Jeep owners, and my boyfriend has told me about it many times. He's had a rough time lately with work and I just wanted to see him smile. I knew he wouldn't be ducked by another Jeep owner as there aren't many Jeeps in our area, but I knew it would make his day if he got one, so I purchased a rubber duck with some cool accessories and made a plan to leave it on his car. I even got my brother in on it so he wouldn't suspect it was me. The day came and my brother left the duck on the car as we went swimming, and he found it on our way back out. Guys, his face lit up, he even did a little happy dance, and wouldn't stop smiling the whole way home. As soon as we got home he was posting his duck in all the groups for other Jeep owners to see. He doesn't know it was me and I don't have the heart to tell him. I want him to enjoy this little bit of happiness for as long as it lasts.
My ex's entitled spoiled girlfriend is trying to steal my house. This house is entirely mine and she thinks she deserves it. My ex-husband and I are in our early 40s and late 30s and have been divorced for almost 3 years now. While he did not want to get divorced, we separated and have been co-parenting our 2 preteens amicably. He lives within 5 blocks of our old home, and while we have 50-50 custody, our kids freely bounce between our places and choose how they want to spend holidays. We've tried hard to create a sense of stability despite the change in our family situation and have standing tune-up therapy twice a year to make sure we're all comfortable with the arrangements. His recent partner Maria, 29, has been the only one to make it past the 6-month mark, and prior to this encounter I would say that she makes him happy and is a pretty reasonable lady. She has a very sweet and precocious son, 9, that we all adore, and generally I thought things were going well. I invited Maria to bring her son to my place if she would like him to join my kids in private language classes. She accepted and this has been going on for a few weeks now. My kids adore him. Last week she said something to me that was surprising. She asked me when I would be moving my things out so that my ex and her could be able to cohabitat. I was taken aback and confused, asking her to clarify my current home, this home? And she nonchalantly told me you don't need all this space for 3 people. We wouldn't have space at my ex's current condo. Her son looked so awful and embarrassed at this point, that I was like, this conversation would need to include my ex. My kids and I live in a brownstone that my ex and I purchased together 50-50, but that I have been renovating since before the divorce. My ex lives in a nice condo that's spacious but is still a little bit of a man cave. Later in the evening I got a text message from her son that was pleading for me to forgive his mom, that he's sorry for his mom and to not tell my ex. I feel awful, but I think I should let my ex know this conversation occurred and let him handle it. I'm the single owner of the house. My ex insisted throughout the divorce that I keep it. We do co-own his condo though, haha. What's a food that you can't eat due to its texture? I gotta tell y'all, I am so done with foods with weird textures. I'm not talking about durian or some exotic poop like that, I'm talking about normal foods that just feel downright disgusting in my mouth. Take bananas, for example. I used to love bananas, but now I can't even look at them without feeling sick. That slimy, mushy texture just makes me want to gag. And don't even get me started on the opposite problem, when they're too ripe and the texture is all grainy and weird. It's like the banana is trying to get me to never eat it again. But it's not just fruit, oh no. Tomatoes are another food that I can't stand the feel of. The gooey insides and squishy skin, it's making me sick just thinking about it. And then there's avocado. I mean, I love guac just as much as the next person, but the texture of an actual avocado half? No, thank you. I know some people are all about that mushy, gooey life, but it just doesn't work for me. I'd rather stick with foods that have a little more substance, you know? Give me a nice juicy steak over a plate of overcooked mush any day. But even then, there are foods that I just can't seem to get on board with no matter how much I try. Like calamari, I can't deal with the rubbery texture, no matter how delicious it's supposed to be. And then there's tofu, my god, the horror. It's like eating a sponge, I swear. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm a bit picky when it comes to texture. I just can't bring myself to eat anything that feels gross in my mouth. But then one day, something unexpected happened. I was out with some friends and we decided to try a new restaurant. We were all a bit skeptical at first, but when the food arrived, we were all pleasantly surprised. It was a little restaurant that specialized in a unique type of cuisine, one that I had never heard of before. The food was full of flavors and textures that I had never experienced before. Some dishes were creamy and smooth, while others were crunchy and savory. I was in awe. This was a completely new world of food that I had never even dreamed of. I was hooked. I started trying all kinds of new dishes and exploring different cuisines. I was amazed at how different textures could make a dish so much more enjoyable. I was no longer afraid of trying new foods, even if they had a texture that I wasn't used to. I was in love with this newfound appreciation for food and I couldn't wait to see what else I would discover. Who knows what the future holds? What's the most brutally honest thing a child has ever said to you? Was waiting for my daughter to get her coat and boots at daycare and another little girl walked up to me. She was probably about 6. She told me her parents got a divorce so she was just like my daughter now. I nodded at her and then I got this gem. I get to go 1 week with my mommy and 1 week with my daddy. Today I went with my daddy. He has a new girlfriend and she's way more pretty than my mom. I wish my mom was as pretty as my daddy's girlfriend. I just cringed. I went to China to teach at an English summer camp. It was a month-long experience, and during that time the children all got to pick American names. These ranged from Tommy to Robot. One day the kids thought it would be fun to give me a Chinese name. The host teacher mentioned that my real name is very close to the Chinese word for beautiful, so I should take that as my name. The kids all paused for a minute thinking about it, before one popped up and said, "Not so beautiful, but still very nice." Thanks kid. I work at an after-school program with kids aged 5 to 12. I had recently had a miscarriage and told the kids I was no longer pregnant because they were excited about me giving birth in the future. I tried to let them know that my baby stopped growing and it passed away in my tummy. Some of them were pretty bummed out after hearing the news. When I was leaving at the end of the day, I was saying bye to a few of them and one of the second graders who adores me yelled out, "Sorry again about your dead baby." For some reason it made me laugh instead of any other emotion. After so much crying from the actual miscarriage, I started cracking up and just said, "Thank you." Do you know why you're single? It's because of who you are and how you look. Well, F you too, you 10-year-old piece of crap.
I've been married for a month, and I despise it. It's the worst decision I've ever made. I don't want this. That's it, really. I just needed to get it off my chest. I don't like my husband as a person, I've realized. We got married quickly, less than a year after meeting. Our marriage was a month ago. I moved across the continent to be with him. So, we never had the chance to live together before that. Everything about him annoys the heck out of me. To cut right to the point, he whines constantly, has tantrums when he doesn't get his way, exaggerates to his friends to look cool, has a cringy sense of humor, doesn't respect my emotional or physical boundaries, has horrendous taste in media in terms of all music, movies, art, etc. This list could go forever. He is in his 30s and myself late 20s. I found out just before the marriage I'm his first girlfriend beyond a hookup. I've tried time and time again to bring up these grievances and it's just not working out. He is truly insufferable in a way that I never realized before living with him. If I tell him, I'm just tired and need some space right now, he starts fake crying and pleading for me to hang out with him, like, incessantly pleading and fake crying. I will explicitly ask him to stop and he will, fake, but he thinks it's convincing, wail in my face. The moment I say, fine, crying instantly gone and he smiles like a little kid. He will then gaslight me and say that I wasn't being clear and he couldn't understand what I was asking. We only have one vehicle, and if I go somewhere to clear my head or drive without explicitly asking, he blows up my phone about how he's gonna call the cops. I can't have any female friends in this new city, new to me, I mean, without him incessantly trying to set them up with his creepy best friend. I'm too tired to be nice. The guy is an ugly, weird, Trump-supporting loser. The lovemaking is pitiful at best. He neglected to tell me he'd only made love 3 times before we got together. Turns out everything I had been told pre-marriage was an exaggeration. His parents are freaking insane and overbearing, and live 20 minutes away. I'm so damn miserable. I hate this. I wish so badly every single night that I could press rewind. I'm so emotionally drained, F me. I know it's all my fault for marrying the guy. I know that, in my defense, I didn't realize how horrible it would be. He wasn't this bad before. I feel like I'm babysitting, not married.
How do I get over her? There's this girl I was interested in, and I messaged her twice. The first time, about a month and a half ago, I tried to communicate that I wanted to get to know her better, but she said she was too busy. The second time, less than 2 weeks ago, I asked when we could see each other again. Her response was that she'd be okay seeing me, but only to help with my homework. When I read that message, I instantly felt like a fool and was embarrassed that I had even asked her out again. I realized that I probably looked like I had no clue what I was doing. In the days that followed, I had to accept the fact that she just wasn't interested in me romantically, and she was likely just being nice. I also realized that I might have made things awkward and uncomfortable, and I felt bad about it. Then, I ran into her on campus 2 days ago. I decided to say hello and make the best of the situation. When I approached her, she acted like she was busy on her phone and looked away. But when I asked if she was on a phone call, she said no, and we talked for less than 4 minutes. She mentioned that she was looking for a professor's office, and coincidentally, I had that professor for a class. I offered to send her my professor's office hours schedule, and then I said I had to go because I was hungry and needed to head home. She said bye half-heartedly, and that was the end of our interaction. I don't plan on messaging her anymore, but I'll likely run into her again because she's going to work at the tutoring center where I spend most of my time doing homework. I still have some feelings for her, but I'm working on moving past them. I promised myself that I won't make any more attempts, even if she were to express interest, which is highly unlikely. I've been considering being honest with her about this situation. Maybe something like, hey, I was interested in you for a while, but I've accepted that our feelings aren't mutual. I want you to know that I respect your decision, and I won't make any more advances. I hope we can continue to work together to excel in school because I've gotten a bit sidetracked from my academic goals recently. I'm not sure if being blunt would resolve this matter, but it might be a way to clear the air and move forward. I told my wife I would pick the kids over her any day. I've always been excited to be a father and I wanted to make sure my child has a memorable childhood, so I started reading books and asking older men how they raised their kids and the mistakes they made. One of the things they told me was that they regret not spending more time with their kids. I can relate to that because my father was never really there for me before he left. So every day since the baby could crawl, I would play with him after work till he goes to sleep. On weekends, I would take him on a walk in his stroller and I would play the piano for him when he gets back. I was really doing my best to make him happy and I thought my wife would be happy, but she wasn't. Yesterday, we had an argument and she complained about how I'm not spending time with her anymore. I told her the reason we don't go on dates and we don't travel like we used to is because the baby is our priority now, and when he grows up, we'll have all the time in the world to ourselves. She then asked me to choose between her and the baby, and that's when I walked out. I came back a few hours later to get some sleep after playing with the baby, and that's when I replied her and said I would pick the kids over you anytime, any day. I love my wife. We were friends for almost 14 years before we got married, but we are also adults now and we have responsibilities. Wow, I'm really getting a lot of hate and insults in my DM. I'll talk to my wife later and we'll make a deal. Thanks for some of the really good advice here. I'm 26 and not only is this my first relationship, it's also my first taste of fatherhood, so I won't act like I know it all. My dad isn't here anymore, so I'm working this out on my own, and so far the majority of the comments are people saying they hope my wife divorces me, but God is my strength and I know he won't put me to shame like he said in his word. Evil stepfather gets what he deserves. My asshole stepfather got rid of all of my prized possessions as a child and beat the crap out of me regularly. I ended up getting all of his prized possessions and selling most of them, and when I told him, he tried to assault me in public, which resulted in criminal charges, losing his job, and his house. When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built halfpipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later, he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there, it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more, extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a faggot nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. He was a middle school teacher and in his off time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened, and in fact, acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money, because the little shit will just spend it on comics and other gay shit. One day, I took $3 and change out of his change jar so that I could buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of an asshole, and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, proceeded to beat me senselessly. At that point, I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he had been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple of years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I was out on my own, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point, they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager and had gotten into weightlifting. Hence, he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer, and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him, so she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house, and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement had been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects, and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection for $14, and his autographed sports memorabilia for $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made for around $6,000. I kept his mother's 2-carat engagement ring, wedding band, and his coin collection since I also collect coins. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago, I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving, I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches were missed and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator, and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, causing several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he couldn't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up, and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had a rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card. I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday, when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above-ground pools, and as he's ringing it out, tell him, I know that my daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway."
People who quit their jobs on the first day, what was your I'm outta here moment? Wasn't exactly the first day, but I didn't show up after the second shift. It was a rather popular cafe chain in my country. I was hired to work in the kitchen as a cook along with another senior cook. Let's put aside the fact that I had zero cooking knowledge whatsoever. The senior cook was leaving the kitchen every 5 minutes to smoke. So there I am, alone in the kitchen, orders are printing fast, and I'm standing there not sure what to do first. And the waitress comes over yelling at me to cook shit I don't have any business cooking, definitely not on my own. Later on the senior cook told me they had at least 2 rats running around the kitchen, showed me they pooped on a plate. I never came back and I'm glad the place got shut down. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouse, the managers broke down to everyone how a 15-minute break works there. Walking to the break room is 2.5 minutes, 10 minutes of actual break and then 2.5 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2.5 minutes to walk to my car and I took a forever break.
In high school, our gym teacher asked us who we thought the smartest teacher in the school was. We guessed the AP Chem teacher, the pre-calc teacher, the AP Physics teacher, etc. He goes, "Nope, it's me. Because I get paid the same as those guys and I play dodgeball all." What was the incident in your high school? 1. When I was in high school, our hick town school had a gang called the Cobras who would spray paint cobras on school property, write it on desks, in the bathrooms, basically everywhere. It was dumb and many of the students had a good idea who was a part of this gang, but the teachers didn't. The principal would call down groups for photos in the yearbook, siblings, sports teams, drama club, etc., on overhead announcements, and one day they called down the Cobras for a school photo for the yearbook, to try and figure out who they were. They caught almost half the students who were defacing school property because they showed up for the group photo. 2. One of the students ditched high school one day and rode his dirt bike really fast in front of the school, popping a wheelie while the school was still in session. He wiped out and slid and hit his head on a light pole and died right in front of the school across the street. Really sad and super crazy. 3. Senior year, we received our yearbooks the week of graduation, and to our surprise the full-page action shot for men's soccer showcased our player jumping up and lifting one leg to trap and control the ball. Unfortunately, he forgot to wear underwear that game and the tip of his wiener was fully visible sticking out of the bottom of his shorts. Our school had over 4,000 students and we were required to bring our yearbook into security to have the wiener sharpied over or we would not be able to walk at graduation. 4. There had been rumors since my freshman year about the assistant principal taking a certain special interest in a few of the girls. Almost everyone wrote it off as high school kids starting stupid rumors. Until my senior year. When 4 police officers came in after school and walked him out in cuffs in front of a few hundred students watching a basketball game against another school. 5. We were all called to an emergency assembly and told a student had passed away. Her friends were distraught and even the people who didn't know her went quiet. I think I remember a group of students putting together a type of memorial card. The whole morning was morbid. Until the dead girl arrived at school and didn't know what was going on. 6. We had a teacher who was super nice. She was out for 3 days and we didn't question it much until she wasn't there again for the next week. Turns out her husband murdered her quite brutally. Was so quiet the next few months for that class we didn't really know how to process it. 7. A guy went into the locker room during gym class and took a dump in another guy's backpack. 8. I went to a private school where you weren't allowed to have your phone on you. One day the vice principal bursts into a classroom and says in a panic, "Quick, I need to use someone's phone." 10 kids got detention and their phones confiscated. Women, what is your worst nice guy experience? He was my best friend since the age of 5 and was practically family. I had a rough adolescent time, drank too much way too young and hung out with bad people. I lost almost all of my friends except this guy who stuck by me through thick and thin. Called me to check on me, always invited me to game nights, told me I was okay, made me feel alright again. He never pressured me to do anything with him, nothing like that at all, even though there were plenty of other guys who did. We'd talk on the phone several times a week until the end and I was adamant we were only friends. He was fine with this and was dating and all of that. A few years ago. I had a mental breakdown one night and he came over to help me out but started acting weird. Wanted me to cuddle in bed next to him to feel closer to each other. He had a steady girlfriend and I'm not okay with this either way, and gets upset about it, all while I'm crying and shaking uncontrollably on the couch. We have a weird relationship for a few months where I'm not comfortable seeing him anymore, but we still talk. One night I decided to invite him over to watch a movie like old times. I was kind of excited and even told him that he was to make no advances at all. Well, what happened next surprised no one but me. He showed up intoxicated and as soon as he stepped through the door he laid hands on me for leading him on for years and saying I deserve this. He did unspeakable things to me right after. He forced to do all sorts of things I would rather not name. Did it matter that I said no, and did he care? No, he deserved it and he had been a nice guy, a friend, for so long. I said aloud no and it didn't matter. He wanted to do it again sometime, maybe regularly if I didn't mind. What is the craziest thing that happened at church? My best friend and I go to a very religious Catholic high school, and we both hate it because we are both atheists, but we can never say that, because we have the world's strictest pastor. There was this boy that I had a huge crush on for a while, let's call him Jacob. Jacob was the most stunning man ever, he had all the most stereotypical features of a hot guy. He was around 6 foot, blonde hair that was somehow wavy at every moment of the day, and piercing blue eyes. All I could think about was riding his meat, but I don't think he felt the same way because he seemed to be extremely religious. However, his best friend was the most naughty guy ever. He was constantly getting in trouble and was the polar opposite to his best friend, Jacob. So one day, me and my best friend are put in a group project with 3 other people. It was us two, Jake and his troublemaker friend, and some other NPC. I purposely tried to flirt with Jacob the whole time, and to my surprise the flirting was returned by him. I told him that he should sneak into the girls' dorm so that work on the project later. What I didn't know was that the pastor was standing right behind me, and gave me a very stern look while saying no sneaking be happening tonight or ever. Although, the pastor was incredibly wrong, that night me and Jacob had a full makeout session, but were interrupted by his best friend, so we promised that at the same time next week, we would meet behind the dorms next to the church to do some unholy deeds. The day came, no pun intended, and it was already extremely dark and all our noises were clouded by the noises of the night. I was giving him the best time of his life to the point where he was shaking from how good it was, just as we were finishing up, again no pun intended. The loudest roar I've heard in my life comes from the pastor, and all the lights turn on and every student in the school comes to see me and Jacob naked, effing. Someone in the crowd of around 300 people yells, "If you're going to F at a church, at least do it missionary." My wife and I abandoned our daughter on vacation. My wife and I have always dreamed of celebrating our 40th anniversary with a luxurious vacation. Just the two of us, reliving the romance of our early years. We had it all planned out for years now and we're excited beyond words. Enter our adult daughter Jane. Jane and her husband got wind of our plans and promptly invited themselves and their 2 children, 9 female and 5 male, along. I originally put my foot down and told them this trip was just for us, which upset her some. But my wife has a hard time saying no to Jane, as she is the youngest of our children and our only daughter, and she didn't want to hurt her feelings, so she reluctantly agreed to let them join. I wasn't thrilled about it at the time, but I wanted to make my family happy, and I knew my wife was also okay with the idea of a family trip. Even if she was heartbroken we wouldn't get our romantic trip. We went along with it. The place we were originally going was not child-friendly, so we changed course and decided on an all-inclusive family-friendly resort. We paid for the resort and our grandchildren's plane tickets. Jane and her husband only had to pay for their own airfare. Here's where things get complicated. As the vacation got closer, I started having a change of heart. I realized that our 40th anniversary was a once-in-a-lifetime milestone, and I wanted to honor it in a way that was true to our original plans. My wife and I might not be able to afford a trip like this again for quite some time, and it's something we always wanted to do. So, without consulting anyone, I switched our tickets last minute to go to the romantic destination that my wife and I had originally planned for. I did not tell Jane or her husband. I didn't even tell my wife until the day before our flight left, which was a day before Jane's flight left for their vacation. It wasn't an easy decision and I feel guilty about it. But I wanted our 40th anniversary to be the special, intimate celebration we had always hoped for. We called Jane after we landed to tell her, and she was extremely upset, to say the least. She seemed of the idea that we were going to look after our grandkids so she and her husband could have alone time, and now that I abandoned her they would have to do it all themselves. I hung up on them when my son-in-law started shouting, and my wife and I enjoyed the rest of our trip. They came back the same day we did but have not answered any of our texts, and Jane seems to be ignoring me. My wife told me she vastly preferred our trip to the family trip we would have taken, but she still doesn't like how Jane is mad at us and wants me to apologize. I'm not sure I want to after learning Jane and her husband were using us for free babysitting and a free trip, but I feel like I should just to keep the peace. Am I the jerk for changing our trip destination last minute and leaving Jane and her family to fend for themselves? My father visited us after he died. I was 7 years old and we, my mom and sister, moved into our new house in Florida. My father had died the year before from complications during a triple bypass. My sister and I slept upstairs. In between our rooms was a pretty open area loft. One night I woke up sometime really late and for some reason I got up and looked across the loft towards my sister's room, and clear as day I saw a shadow in the shape of a man standing at the edge of the stairs. The house was pitch black, there were no lights to cast a shadow. Being 7 years old I freaked the F out thinking it was a burglar and jumped back in bed and cried myself to sleep. I woke up a short period of time later, maybe 15 to 30 minutes. I got up and checked the stairs again and the shadow was gone, so I grabbed my little Tyke's flashlight and headed downstairs towards my mom's room. Her door was cracked a little bit, so I peeked through and I saw a shadow figure walk around my mother's bed then bend over her. I shine my light on the floor in front of her door and the figure juts to an upright position, seems to look at me, then turns and walks into her bathroom. I'm an atheist and I'm not sure if I believe in spirits, but to this day I have no explanation for what happened other than it being my father checking up on us and then bending over to kiss my mom goodbye, perhaps one last time.
Were you ever that 1 in 1 million? If so, what's your story? I am a 19-year-old male. In August of last year, I was driving with my sister when suddenly her face turned cold. "Gavin, your eyes are yellow," I remember her saying. I quickly pulled down the passenger's mirror, and to my horror, 2 yellow eyes radiated back at me. Fast forward, I spent a month being sick. The initial diagnosis was hepatitis. I went back to the doctor. Nothing was better, things were worse in fact. Was sent to the then to the liver transplant unit at UCSF. By this point my eyes had turned muddy orange, and my pee was the color of a mahogany tree. Anyways, the team of liver doctors at UCSF managed to save my liver. I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis. Oh, and my eyes are white again.
My girlfriend is begging me to give up my Ivy League scholarship so we can continue dating. I am being faced with an amazing opportunity, but I don't know whether to choose between my academic career or the love of my life. I would do anything for my girlfriend, but I am feeling extremely nervous to simply give up the future that I've been working for since I was 13. My girlfriend and I have been dating since we were 15. We're both 18 now and in the middle of applying to colleges. Ever since I was 13 I knew I wanted to be a scientist since it was my favorite subject. Ever since then I've worked tirelessly in all my science classes and done any type of scientific extracurricular that public school had to offer. My girlfriend and I met in our high school science club. I was the president and she had just moved to the area and was trying to join clubs to make new friends. We fell in love in only a couple of months, and we've been together since then. I truly believe she is my soulmate and it's only making this decision harder. My girlfriend doesn't really understand my passion for science since academics have never really been her thing. Don't get me wrong, she is a smart girl, but I have been applying to Ivy League colleges and she has said that she's fine just going to community college after we graduate. She pretended to be supportive of me, but now I see that she never really wanted me to get accepted into the colleges that I wanted, since they're all far away. Either way, last week I received my acceptance letter in the mail from my top college, Princeton. My hands were shaking as I read the letter, And I saw my dad cry for the very first time when I told him the news. It felt like a dream come true until I told my girlfriend about the letter. I remember being so excited on the phone telling her about how they were offering me a full scholarship, but all she said was yeah. That's great. And ended the call pretty fast. The next time we saw each other in person, my girlfriend broke down crying and said that she couldn't deal with the fact that I would be so far. She said she felt bad about asking, but then she looked at me and asked me to turn down my scholarship and go to school in the state, so that I could remain close to her. I don't even know how to describe what I felt when she was saying all this, up until that day I saw her as my loving, supportive girlfriend. But I guess that's not who she is. She's always known how much a career in science means to me and how badly I've wanted this the entire time she's known me. I don't understand how she could ask me to give it up like it was nothing. I don't want to believe that she's being selfish. I think she's just in love, just like me. I'm feeling incredibly torn. One half of me knows that I would hate myself if I gave up this opportunity, but what if this girl is meant to be my wife? What if she's my future instead of Princeton? What ruined your life? This has been a permanent cloud hovering over me my entire life. A negative relationship with food. I've been overweight my entire life. Even in my kindergarten class picture it's easy to see. By my middle school years, it was my defining feature. I was the fat kid. It was made a little easier to bear by the fact that I was also the tall kid, and I was a guy. I was mostly ignored, while the fat girls in school were constantly bullied. My parents were of the "we're just big people, so get used to it" mentality. Those are the actual words of wisdom they gave to me back then. They made zero attempts to curb my eating, get me more active, or do anything besides buy me bigger clothes as needed. One of my earliest memories is from second grade, when my mother packed me 2 sandwiches in my lunch, and my teacher made a comment that my lunch was bigger than her husband's. My parents just wanted me to be full, all of the time, full and happy. Those two things always seemed to go together for them. If you were unhappy, it was probably because you were hungry or tired. I was taught emotional eating at an early age. I did manage to drop a lot of weight in college. Got within striking distance of being a normal weight for once in my life. But then came marriage and children and a career and adult responsibilities, and some of the weight came back. But I lost it the wrong way anyway. I basically starved myself half of the time. I'd literally see how long I could go before my hunger made me dizzy. And I worked out 2 to 3 hours per day. Young, single guys can do that. Older, married guys with careers and kids cannot. I'm a middle-aged man now. Too old for blaming my parents for my own choices now. I know what I should eat. More importantly, I know how much I should eat. I know when to stop. I also work out every day. Get a Peloton. It's worth it. I also make sure that my own children don't overeat, and see me making good choices when it comes to my own diet and exercise. Still, there's always that cloud hanging over me. Unhealthy food is so easy to get, and it does still make me happy, at least for a moment. Then the guilt comes. Anytime I eat anything that's even a little enjoyable, I know there's going to be a wave of guilt come over me soon afterwards. How I went from rags to riches to getting beaches, respectfully. When I entered college, I was an awkward, clumsy kid. I had never kissed a girl, never gone to a party, and I was a complete hermit. The only thing I sort of had going for me were my grades, but I wasn't even good enough to be a teacher's pet. On the other hand, my college roommate Jack was the opposite of me, the kind of guy that all girls like. His plan was to rush a frat in his first semester and live there in his second. I thought he'd be annoying or arrogant, but Jack had a great personality, and he was the most fun, energetic guy I'd ever met. Surprisingly, we got close. He taught me how to play Smash and I tutored him in calc, and by the end of the semester, Jack was super bummed over leaving to live in a frat because it meant we would hang out less. We'd basically become each other's best friends. When we each went home for the semester, Jack gave me a going-away present, a digital guide called the Facial Gains Guide that was supposed to improve my looks. I'll be honest, I was a bit offended with Jack for giving it to me at first, but he told me that his brother had given it to him halfway through high school and that it had pretty much changed his life, so he wanted me to have it, too. I didn't really think it was a big deal at first. Between the semesters, though, I had a lot of downtime and Jack kept texting me about it, so I finally cracked the guide open. And, let me tell you, it had me hooked. I've always been someone who learns better with clear, precise instruction. And this guide systemically broke down how to improve everything regarding your appearance, not just your face. It had sections on grooming, self-care, hygiene, styling, skin tones, symmetry, and I'm only listing the things that jumped out at me from memory. It was like an instruction manual for becoming attractive, and I slowly started incorporating habits from the Facial Gains Guide into my life, from facial exercises to working out to dressing better. When I returned to college the next semester, not too many physical changes had actually taken place, but my confidence was already way boosted. And I let Jack drag me to some of his frat house's parties, met a few girls, and even started participating more in class. From there on, self-improvement was like rolling down a hill. It was effortless because I understood exactly what I needed to do and how to do it. The hardest part was not doing too much at once and trying to actually change my lifestyle rather than just forging short-term habits, and it worked because a year later, Jack asked me if I wanted to rush his frat. And I was shocked at first because, well, I didn't consider myself nearly attractive or funny enough to blend in with frat dudes, but I went to some social events, and since everyone knew me as Jack's boy, I was welcomed like a hero. Apparently, Jack had revealed to them that my tutoring was the thing that stopped him from failing out of college back in his first semester, and so his friends already loved me for helping out their buddy. A few months later, I was invited to join, paid my dues, and my life was never the same. I suddenly had a default social group, A set of guy friends who were happily inviting me to a world I had only ever fantasized about, and I felt like I belonged, too. All because Jack spent $30 on a gift that he didn't even need to give. Now, I'm thinking that I'll pass the facial gains baton on down to another poor, anxious comp sci student to keep the good energy flowing. Maybe two. Jack, if you're reading this, thanks man, love you, and also please stop flirting with my little sister.
What accident happened in a sleepover that ruined the sleepover? I had a sleepover for my birthday. Several girlfriends were sleeping over. We woke up and one of my friends, the shy quiet one, bless her heart, was gone, vanished from her sleeping bag. There was also a mysterious dried substance on my best friend's sleeping bag. She said, "What's this?" and scrapes and picks it off. Turns out it was vomit. There was vomit everywhere. My mom had to take her home in the middle of the night because she woke up and threw up all over herself. She tried to cover her mouth so she had it all over her hands. She went up the stairs to get to the bathroom and touched the walls the whole way up. When she got to the bathroom she wiped her face on the hand towel and I'll never forget the perfect face print that was left in vomit. A real work of art. The real tragedy is my mom had to clean it all up in the middle of the night after driving her home. If you're out there, Madeline, I hope it doesn't haunt you. More info. She threw up in another girl's shoes. The vomit stained the towels from hunter green to orange. When my tired mom threw her sleeping bag in the washer, she accidentally set it for small load, so when she handed it back to her mom later, chunks of vomit fell out all over her. It was also her first sleepover, probably last.
I committed a hit and run, but the victim found me and confronted me at my job. I know what I did was wrong, but I suffer from extreme anxiety, and after the accident happened I just panicked and fled. My mind knew what I was doing was wrong, but I just couldn't stop my body from driving away. I was leaving my job the other day while it was dark. I am usually a good driver, but this day I was exhausted from work and not paying attention very well. Anyways, I was reversing out of my parking spot when I heard a loud crunch. I freaked out at the sound and turned around in my seat to see that I had backed up into a car parked right behind me. Their car was much smaller than mine and I had inflicted some pretty serious damage. Half of their trunk was totally caved in, and it definitely looked like you wouldn't be able to open it again. The car looked really awful, and I don't currently have insurance since I'm unable to afford it. I know it's wrong for me to be uninsured in the first place, but I am working and trying hard to get back on track. I knew I would be screwed if I found the owner and offered to pay the damages. I thought they might sue me or even attack me out of anger since the damage was so bad. But like I said, this happened late at night, and when I looked around, it seemed like no one was around to see what I had done. I knew for a fact that my work parking lot had no security cameras as well. So that's when I made the awful decision to commit and hit and run. I just finished backing my car up and fled out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I was so nervous the next day back at work, I wondered if someone might have seen me, and I thought the cops might come for me at any moment. I wish the cops had been the one to come for me instead of the owner of the car. Maybe it would have been more formal and less humiliating. But nothing happened that first day I was back at work, and it wasn't until the next day that my life completely imploded. When I walked into my job to clock in, it was the middle of the day and the place was already full of customers. I hadn't even gotten to the clock-in computer when I heard someone behind me yell, "You." I turned around and there were middle-aged women stomping toward me. She pointed to my car in the lot outside my workplace and asked me if I owned it. I started stuttering, knowing full well she must have been a witness or the victim of my crime. She didn't wait for me to answer, she just shoved the police report in my hands. She said that one of the shop owners in the plaza was closing up when they heard an accident outside, and they had come out just in time to see me speed off, but not before they wrote down my plates. She yelled at me a bit and asked if I really thought I would get away with it, and told me I should be ashamed of myself. It was quite a scene and all the other customers were watching and whispering as she continued to yell at me. She is suing me, and since I had no insurance, the charges are high and I'll be totally ruined. After this case, I'll be in thousands of dollars of debt and I will have a criminal record. I just wish I could go back in time and do the right thing in the first place.
I found my boyfriend's trophies and now I don't know what to do. I, 28 female, have been dating my boyfriend, 28 male, for almost 6 years with a 1-year-long breakup after an issue with infidelity on his end. I gave him another chance and things have been going great. We had decided to take things slow when we got back together, a little over a year ago, so we didn't move in together right away, and a couple months before my lease was up we started looking for a place. I was slowly starting to move some of my stuff into his place as my lease will be up a couple weeks before his, and we won't be able to move into our new place until that time. With summer basically already here, I was getting my winter stuff into the little bit of storage I could in his apartment, and I stumbled across a drawer with 2 pairs of my panties that had long gone missing. For context, the drawer is one of those long and deep under the bed drawers. The panties were directly in front, you could see the red fabric clearly by only opening the drawer a couple of inches. I asked him about it and he seemed embarrassed and said I had left them at his place when we broke up, and that he would use them when he missed me or was thinking about me during his personal time. I might be an absolute weirdo for this, but I thought that was kind of sweet, so I told him to keep them. He had said he's never done anything like that before and he was too embarrassed to tell me. Fast forward to moving day. He had to work that morning, but we had almost everything already packed and ready to go, so I was just supposed to stay with the movers and unlock necessary doors and stuff. He said that when he got done with work he would deal with the bed frame thing since it was so bulky and required power tools to take apart. Everything got moved much more quickly than anticipated. We were just moving across our small town, so I thought I'd start the process of moving the bed frame. When I pulled out the drawers, I found, in the very back, 10 pairs of women's panties, not including the 2 of mine in front, and a uniquely patterned pair of bikini bottoms. I quickly put the drawers back and reverted to the original plan and waited for him to get done with work. I have not brought up finding the full contents of the drawer, but did sort of revert to my old 2 a.m. mental instability spiral routine of online stalking the girl he cheated on me with a few years ago, and found a picture of her wearing the bikini bottoms. This was bad enough, but she was wearing them on a vacation that took place, or was at least posted, a weekend he was out of town for what he told me was work, and she has since then not worn them in 2 other bathing suit posts. I have fully convinced myself that he's cheated again despite only having a drawer of clothing items and an Instagram post that very well could have been posted long after the picture was taken. No panties have been added to the collection, and I still haven't said anything to him about it despite him asking multiple times if something is bothering me. I guess I'm asking for advice on what I should do now. Added for both context and a sort of update, her Instagram post was captioned over a year of being sunburnt, and was a kind of photo dump of multiple trips. With the time frame of our breakup, it's a very real possibility that they were together while we weren't, and she is just now posting them, although it would have had to be literal days before we reconciled officially. We live in a small town and my best friend is dating her brother, so I've enlisted her to dig for some info. I've also taken photos and screenshots which I intend to print out, and write up a sort of script type thing or notes to confront him. It's not lost on me that this is at best incredibly creepy and dishonest, and at worst dangerous and perverted. I have already started looking into alternative living arrangements, which is why I initially reached out to my best friend, and will be staying with her.
I lied to a blind neighbor and told him I moved away. Many years ago, I was standing on one of my balconies, and that's when a taxi driver was obnoxiously blowing his horn out front of the building and yelling for a blind man to walk toward my voice from his own townhouse. That direction was toward traffic. My roommate and I had immediately gone down and helped him to the taxi and scolded the driver for being so rude. I made the mistake of giving the blind neighbor my phone number so that I could give him a ride in the future. To this day I still am unsure how he dialed so many times. Then the phone calls came. And never stopped. And when I gave him a ride, he would ask for various detours. I'm very calculated by nature. If he had told me beforehand where he wanted to go, it would be cool, but no. We'd be driving along and he'd throw in 2 to 3 extra places on each ride. And it came to be every day that he wanted rides. And he'd even call me to remind me to give him a ride, not that it was ever late or backed out. Finally I had enough, so I gauged how blind he was. His response was that he was blind as a bat. A week or 2 after he said that, I told him I had a job interview in the next city. A week after that, I told him I got the job and was moving away in a month. I didn't really move away though, in case you didn't catch that part yet. After I moved away, it was strange as hell walking by him in silence as he stood on the sidewalk. Maybe he really was blind as a bat. My wife sees everyone as potential customers. She took it a step too far this time. My wife owns an Etsy shop where she sells handmade jewelry. She has some real talent and the jewelry she sells is genuinely very nice and high quality. She gets a surprising amount of sales and has great reviews. The issue is that everywhere we go, every conversation she slips in something about her shop and tries to promote it. Talking to a friend? She'll casually mention a big sale she made or a custom order she got and not very subtly mention that she'd give her friend a coupon or something similar. Talking to our waiter? She'll mention that she has a pair of earrings on her shop that would complement their eyes. Talking to someone online? She'll somehow manage to say as the owner of a small business. She literally cannot have a conversation anywhere with anyone without trying to sell them her jewelry. The other day was a family member's birthday, and they were having a decently sized get-together with just other family members and a few close friends. I went with my wife, who is a very social person even outside of promoting her shop, so she was quickly making conversation with my family. Of course, not 5 minutes later she was showing someone the bracelet she had on that she made and mentioning that she sells them and talking about how since they were family she would happily give them a 25% discount. She probably had that exact same conversation with at least 5 people during the 2 hours we were there. As soon as we left, I spoke to her and said she needs to quit doing that. I told her if people were actually interested, they would ask her about her store, but not every single person she talks to wants or needs to hear about her art. She got upset and said that she just wants to spread her product and doesn't see how what she's doing is wrong. My wife hasn't spoken to me since. I feel like I was a jerk, but how can I nicely tell her to stop being so obnoxious? I was hated by my father my whole life because he thought that my mother cheated on him, so I gave him the paternity test and made him miserable before I cut contact. My father used to work in the military. He had left my mother for a long time, throughout her pregnancy and a good 2 years into my birth. So when he came back, he had a 2-year-old son. He was sure I was not his but this neighbor because the neighbor used to help out my mother. My mother never agreed to a paternity test. He could still have done it, but she was unequivocal that she would drag him through hell if he did that. She said she did not cheat on him. He has no evidence of it and no reasonable logic behind it. If he can't trust her, the marriage is over, and he can sign half of his everything for her and look for a new wife. He never behaved severely with her. People say he loves her, but in his eyes, I was the evidence. He blamed me for everything. He never let me call him dad, never hugged me or picked me up. I have always been an eyesore for him. Somehow, they didn't divorce, but I have always seen them fighting because of me. My father would do something neglectful towards me, my mother would call it out, they would start arguing, and it would end in my mother shouting and crying that he still believed that she cheated on him, and then my father would apologize and comfort her. But my mother did take care of me, well, until my brother was born. My brother Jack was born when I was 11. Things got worse for me since then. It's not like they were abusing me, he never raised his voice or beat me. I was fed, clothed, tuition fees paid, and had a roof over my head, but that was all. My mother stopped putting effort into sticking up for me. If he did something mean to me, she would just avoid it. I was the enormous pink elephant in the room. Bringing me up would always start a fight. She was tired of constantly fighting for me and chose peace, avoiding my existence. He would call Jack his son, pointedly at the dining table when I was eating with them. At first, my mother used to say, "But Evan is your son too, honey." Now she would just eat silently or change the topic. When introduced to new people, he would say, "This is my son Jack, and this is Evan." He would never show up at any event regarding me. I was despised in the small town community, where people would whisper, "Isn't that the illegitimate boy?" Yeah, poor dude. He was sacrificing his life for the country when his wife was sleeping around. It was evident that I would move out when I turned 18 and go NC with them. They did not object. My mother said, "Oh, but you should visit us sometimes." But he said, "I should also be one when I turn an adult. I should make my fortune and not wait to get stuff from him. I turned 18 on 27 of last month and will go to another state when this month ends. I'll stay at a friend's place and hopefully find a job. I have saved up some money, but it's not much. I guess I can manage it for a few months." Before doing that, I wanted to see the paternity test done. It gave me a sense of closure. My mother also agreed, though reluctantly, when I said I wanted to do it. Now comes the part that most of you probably have already seen coming. Yeah, it turns out I am his after all. Mother is in the "I told you so" mod. He is devastated for all those years wasted on hatred. Poor guy. Now he wants to make it up to me. He is begging me to stay. He says he's sorry. He has made a mistake. I am not budging. I'm not letting him know which state I'm going to, what I will do, or any of my contact info. He didn't feel like keeping them before and doesn't need to now. I also told him I would never say anything about him to my children. I will never show him my face as promised, and I will never accept anything from him. He told everyone about this to convince me to stay or keep in contact. I told them he was not my father. Everyone is saying I'm being unnecessarily cruel. To someone who has made a mistake, it's not his fault. The situation was like that. What's the biggest green flag in a relationship you've ever seen? This one time, I decided to completely improv a date. We went to a nice sushi restaurant, but I didn't have any other plans for the day. I was honest with her about it, and surprisingly, she was totally fine with just going with the flow. So, we drove around town together, and she helped me choose some posters for my room. Later, we explored our college town and ended up having a great conversation in my car. She was not only incredibly beautiful but also very intelligent and classy. Despite all that, she had no expectations for the date and was simply happy to be spending time with me. She told me it was her first real date, but I found it hard to believe since she had dated many other guys before. We continued to see each other for a few months, but we didn't put any labels on our relationship or get jealous about anything. We could be open and honest about everything, including our past relationships and who we found attractive. She knew about my flaws and controversial views, but she didn't judge me for them. She was really cool about everything. She was never clingy or demanding, but whenever we had the chance, she loved hanging out with me. And when I couldn't or didn't want to, she understood and was honest about it. Eventually, we had to break up because I moved away. But she supported my decision without trying to change my mind, and she was a great help during that time. We still keep in touch, and she remains a close friend. She's one of the few exes I genuinely want the best for. Through this experience, I learned a lot about relationships. She showed me what a good relationship looks like, and it completely changed my perspective. I guess the green flag was that she was and still is an amazing friend, no matter what else happened between us. Retail workers, what's the most wholesome experience you've ever had with a customer? Sophomore year of high school, I worked for a small mom and pop hardware store. The place was famous for being about half the size of a 7-Eleven, but still having almost everything you could find at a big box store. The retail workers there knew where everything was, and there was always at least one employee standing in the front by the entrance to immediately say hi. "How can I help you today?" And then take the person to the location of whatever they asked for. The owners very explicitly told us that we are not to accept tips from customers for helping carry a customer's purchase. So a petite little old lady comes in. Perfectly done hair that never moved independent of the rest of her head, and dressed in very colorful, ornate blouses with a giant brooch on her lapel. Just a well put together, dignified woman. She wanted some lawn chairs so she could host guests in her garden. She was a super sweet and pleasant woman, and it only took us about 5 minutes to find a chair that she liked the looks of that was also light enough for her to move and fold herself. She bought 3 of them. When she went to the cashiers, she asked for a hand getting the chairs back to her apartment. Due to her age, seeming frailty, and the fact that she was just such a pleasant customer, my bosses got her address and told her they'd have them delivered that afternoon. So an hour or two later, the store's pretty dead, and my boss says, "Hey Fergie, why don't you go deliver those chairs to that lady?" I immediately said yes, grabbed the chairs, and made the quarter-mile-ish walk to her building. She lets me in, shows me where to put the chairs, and before I can say thank you for shopping at local hardware store, she's already grabbed my right hand and put a handful of Werther's and Bazooka Joe gum in it. I'm super surprised and can barely say thank you, but when I manage to stammer that out, she goes and puts a $20 bill in my hand too. I tell her through habit that I can't accept tips, even though this was 2002 and it was almost 4 hours of work that she just tipped me, but thank you so much for the thought. The lady looks right in my eyes, closes my fingers around the candy and the money, and says, with absolutely delightful sincerity, "Honey, if you don't think your bosses want you to have this money, just don't tell them about it." We both had a pretty good laugh about that, and I gave her a hug, thanked her again, and went on my way. I took her advice and didn't tell my bosses, instead saying she tipped me in candy. I took the $20 and invested it in an Ozzy Osbourne Greatest Hits CD, which was the start of a lifelong love of all things heavy metal.
I made my 7-year-old go to Alcoholic Anonymous meetings. I have an amazing son, almost 8, who is incredibly sweet, well-mannered and inquisitive. Although, I guess most parents think of their kids that way, I quit drinking about 2 months ago and have been adamant about doing the AA program correctly, 90 meetings in 90 days, sponsor, daily readings, therapy, etc. I really want to be a good mom and make up for my bad decisions when I was drinking. I never harmed him or put him in danger, but I just wasn't present and am remorseful about my drinking past. The problem is that I'm a single mom who works full-time and I live in a small town. Because it's small, there aren't a lot of options in terms of AA meetings, so the only one I can really attend is the 5:30 based on my schedule and my son's. His father has him part-time, so on those days, I can attend meetings by myself, but on my days I have to bring my son. I don't have anyone to leave him with, and babysitting wouldn't work because nobody wants to babysit for just 1 hour. It doesn't financially make sense for them. So, I take my son to meetings. Naturally, he isn't too thrilled when I have to. Before you suggest I could do Zoom meetings, I really don't get anything out of them. I like the in-person connection and atmosphere. My ex, who has never taken my alcoholism seriously and has never actually attended an AA meeting, says I'm a jerk for exposing our child to that kind of atmosphere and those kinds of people. The truth is, those people are what have saved my life. They are so sweet and good with my son, and, while sometimes the subject matter can be a little adult-ish, we mostly talk about how to be better people and live a spiritually sound existence and to help our fellow man. I personally think it's good for my son to be surrounded by people that are trying to better themselves, and also to let him know at an early age the effects of alcoholism as it runs in my family, but maybe I'm the jerk. And way off the mark and am doing more damage than good. I would just like outside opinions that aren't emotionally connected to the situation. Am I the a-hole for taking my 7-year-old to AA meetings with some of the topics that are addressed?
I think my best friend is too unattractive to have such high standards. I met her in high school, and she seemed to have pretty low self-esteem. She has A-cup breasts and big thighs, not a good combo. Her face is average at best. She had bad self-esteem mostly because her younger sister has a face on the hot side of average and a fit body with nice, large breasts. Her sister was also more attractive because she was confident, so she didn't seem needy and weird. Anyway, she was a loyal friend, so I was constantly encouraging her. I would tell her that she's pretty. I would tell her that at least she had a better personality than little sis, which is true about 60% of the time. I would tell her that the guys that wouldn't date her are jerks. The actual reason she couldn't get a guy, I found out upon getting to know her type, was that she was super shallow. She wants to date 9-10s when she's maybe a 6 on her very best day. I've known her for 4 years, and I've built her self-esteem up. Now, she's conceited and thinks more than ever that she deserves a super hot guy. At the age of 20, she finally has her very first real boyfriend. She thinks he's smoking hot. He's also a 25-year-old with a kid that is out on parole. I am trying to work on her priorities, as a friend, but I don't know how to tell her that she needs a less attractive guy with a better personality without telling her that she's not pretty enough for the complete package. It's especially awkward when she judges guys as good enough for me when they aren't good enough for her in her opinion. She knows I'm not looking for an Abercrombie model, so it's nice that she supports me when I like an average dude with a wonderful personality. Yet it's still insulting that she thinks, based on what she values in men, that it's okay for me to date the lowly guys that she doesn't want. The truth is that I'm prettier than her. I have a better face and a more proportional body. I'm in better shape than her too. Why does she think she deserves more than me? I don't want her to have bad self-esteem. It's like when you're a kid and your parents say that the boys are mean to you because they have secret crushes on you. I was that parent to my friend. I told her the boys were insecure or jerks or whatever I could say to make her feel better. Now, she acts like she's a supermodel and any guy would be lucky to be with her, so she shouldn't date anyone that isn't perfect looking. She says things like, "He's cute. I like that he's muscular." Wait, no. His abs aren't good enough. She's only dated one guy. He went to prison for something that she won't tell me about, and she tells me everything, so I'm assuming it's terrible. Even without that fact, she constantly complains that he controls her. He doesn't let her hang out with her friends anymore. I hope that giving her self-esteem would cause her to get a guy that would treat her right, not give her a reason to keep her high physical standards. I am not trying to control her. If I was, then I would tell her to break up with her boyfriend and find a nice boy from the Baptist university she's enrolled in. Instead of doing that, I just try to help her. She complains about her boyfriend and I say things like, "Well, what do you want to do? How important is that to you? What is going to make you happy?" I'm just afraid that she will never be happy. She's not ugly, but she's not realistic either. If she gets to date a model with a heart of gold, then I will be so happy for her. I just don't think that will happen. A completely separate issue is the impression I get that she thinks she deserves a better guy than me. She'll say that guys are fine for me, but they aren't up to her standards. My dating pool is my friends. I love being in a relationship where I'm friends with my significant other. My boyfriend and I watch movies and hang out and have the same opinions and really care about each other. That's the kind of relationship I think my best friend deserves. I know I sounded vain earlier, but I'm not. I'm a 6 most of the time, and maybe a 7 on my very best day. The only reason I started comparing myself to my best friend and thinking about who is prettier is the way she acts. I don't think I deserve someone better than who she deserves. I think she deserves a guy like mine. I'm dating a 145-pound guy with muscular arms but not really defined abs. He has a slightly above average face and dresses really well. He's super funny and charming. He's smart, 35 on his act. He is extremely nice to me. He's a great friend. My best friend would rather be with someone that she has nothing in common with who treats her like crap, as long as he has abs and looks like a runway model. Teachers, what was the saddest thing you've discovered about one of your students? I'm a preschool teacher, but this breaks my heart. At my first preschool, in 2013, there was this little boy that none of the other teachers could really handle. He was about 2, and he was in my very first ever class. The child was always high-strung, full of energy and running around. We attributed this to him lacking stability in his life, bouncing around from him living with his aunt and uncle, then grandparents, then dad. Mom wasn't in the picture, we were told she was arrested for drugs. And then one day he disappeared. Was just gone. My director called his aunt weekly for a month, before just taking him off the roster. I was devastated. Well, 6 months later he comes back, and is a completely different child. Dark circles under his eyes, quiet. He didn't even seem to remember me. On his first day back he accidentally knocked a little girl down while running, and when she started crying he became petrified. He sat under a table and stared at me without moving at all. I asked his aunt about it that night, and she told me the reason he disappeared is because his mother came home and got custody. They hadn't seen him in almost as long as I had. She had seemed to be doing okay until a neighbor had called the cops for suspected domestic abuse, and when they arrived she was in the kitchen with a knife, threatening to end this little boy. I don't think I can go a day without remembering this.
Reddit, what is your most cringe story about someone who has a crush on you? I managed a cafe that was located about an hour-something drive from my house. There was this guy who had it really bad for me. He came in a couple of times a day and refused to be served by any of my staff, just me. Anyway, as if that wasn't bad enough. One day during the winter it got very icy, so I decided to not drive home, but stay in a band instead. Safety and shit. Don't ask me how, but he found out and stayed in the same band. Was woken up by him banging on my door. When I open he stands there fuming about how I don't trust him or why else would I lock the door to my room during the night. Now, who doesn't lock the door in a band? Also, well, guess what? He obviously tried the door. What the what? Also, by the time I made it to work the next morning, 2-minute walk from the band, he had already managed to tell a good portion of the townies we had spent the night together. This guy actually scared the crap out of me. I regularly passed up other people working on the same street to not have to walk to the parking lot alone.
What is Gordon Ramsay's true personality? I worked with him on several episodes of Kitchen Nightmares. I was a lowly PA, so his treatment of me speaks a lot. Firstly, he rode in the front seat of his car next to the driver. This says something about him not being high and mighty. During my first 3 days, he would give me a brief nod whenever he passed. He knew I was part of the team. But PA coming though, he's not going to waste a lot of time on me. On my second episode, also 3 days, he would engage people around me in friendly banter. He's the type of guy who makes fun of people, but with a broad smile on his face so you know he's joking. He also joined us in tossing around a football during a slow point. By my third episode, I ranked hello and smile. On the last day of the third episode, just before the restaurant opened, a producer pointed out my untied shoe. Being bone tired, I pulled out a chair to sit and tie it. Gordon suddenly shouted, "What are you doing?" "That's it. Fired." I looked up in shock and he immediately laughed at me. It felt awesome. Famous people are expected to be on. It uses up energy to be charming for temporary employees. He was polite, but didn't spend a lot of time with us. As he grew to know and trust us, he became warm and open. He's a little gruff and sarcastic, but a lot of fun. And others who did multiple seasons on the show told me he was very loyal to them. I can't count him as a friend, but how he treats other people says a lot about him. Ada for not attending my Sills destination wedding due to the way I was treated when my dad died. In 2021 I, F19 at the time, and my BF, M20 at the time, were in a tough spot with living arrangements and were offered by my Bill Fred 28 meters, and his GF Gina 32F to stay with them while we looked for an apartment. Originally we planned to stay 2 months but after 1 month realized we needed more money than we thought, therefore needed more time to save. We went to Fred and Gina and asked for a time extension on our stay. Fred and Gina have never rented an apartment before, so we had to explain the entire process and why we needed more time. The move-out date was changed to Jan 2nd with the premise that apartment availability was not in our control, but we will be moving out in the month of January. It was also agreed that if something unfortunate were to happen, such as a family emergency and/or death, that we would be granted an extension of our stay accordingly. During my stay I got close with one of my Sil Haley, 35F. A week after Thanksgiving my dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack while at work. I was incredibly devastated and so was my BF. He worked with him and were quite close. We informed Fred and Gina and asked if we could take 2 weeks to mourn his death and attend his funeral, and then we would get right back to securing an apartment. They agreed. After the 2 weeks had passed we found and secured the soonest available apartment, Jan 25. We informed Fred and Gina about the move and they got really upset about it. What's an addiction that people often overlook? I was a young teacher, fresh out of college, brimming with idealism and ready to change the world. Little did I know, the world had much more in store for me than I could ever imagine. It all started innocently enough. I had a classroom filled with eager minds and a desire to make a difference. But then, she walked in. Her name was Emma, a bisexual bombshell with fire in her eyes and a spirit that couldn't be tamed. The moment our eyes met, a spark ignited, and I found myself drawn to her like a moth to a flame. I couldn't resist the gravitational pull that kept us orbiting each other, ignoring the consequences that lurked in the background. In the beginning, it was all innocent. We chatted during breaks, shared laughter and stories, and I reveled in her presence. But as our connection deepened, this innocent infatuation quickly transformed into an addiction that I couldn't control. It was a dangerous dance on the tightrope between right and wrong. The thrill of the forbidden only intensified our desire. We hid our connection from prying eyes, stealing moments in secret corners and whispering forbidden words. I knew it was wrong, but the intoxication of her touch and the taste of her lips clouded my judgment. It was an addiction unlike any other. This addiction consumed me, mind, body, and soul. It tore at my conscience, but I couldn't bring myself to let her go. The pull was too strong, the allure too enticing. I became a slave to my desire, trapped in a web of tangled emotions. But addiction never leads to a fairy tale ending, does it? The flame that burned brightly eventually blazed out of control, threatening to consume everything in its path. Rumors began to circulate, eyes started to narrow, and the walls began to close in around us. The school's strict policies and the fear of scandal forced us to reconsider our every move. And so, in the midst of this burning love, we were abruptly torn apart. Our connection severed, our hearts left bleeding. The addiction now turned into withdrawal, leaving me empty and lost. But I couldn't let her go. I had to find a way to get her back. I was determined to make things right, so I took a risk and followed her. I tracked her down to a seedy bar in the middle of nowhere, and when I saw her, I knew I had to do something. I had to make her understand how much she meant to me. But when I finally reached her, I was too late. She was already in the arms of another. I felt my heart drop as I watched them embrace, and I knew that I had lost her forever. I had gambled and I had lost. I was filled with remorse and longing, my world crumbling around me. I had been blindsided by an addiction that I could not control. Love, desire, and addiction can manifest in many forms, and sometimes it's the ones we least expect that grab hold of us with such force. But remember, beneath the allure lies the potential for destruction. So here I stand, a cautionary tale of the dangers of addiction, of the risks we take when we try to outrun our demons. I may have lost her forever, but I have gained a greater understanding of the power of addiction. Until next time, my friends. Update: I had intimacy with my neighbor and now he won't leave me alone. I made the mistake of having intimacy with my neighbor. So I'm going to begin with a typical thanks for the advice and for those who kept telling me. Yes, I've learnt my lesson about having intimacy with someone who I don't really know and can't really avoid. Anyway, on to the update on this situation. The first thing I did was delete and block him from Facebook, but that's the easy bit because I was still going to have to talk to him in person. I coincidentally ran into him on Monday. The first thing he said to me was, "Have you deleted your Facebook or something because I can't find you anymore?" So I went for it and gave a long speech about how he's a nice guy and I thought we could be friends, but I feel like I'm leading him on by hanging out together as I'm really not interested. He replied that he really does just want to be friends and that it would be more awkward now if we're not. I just said something like, "I don't want to give you the wrong impression, so I think it's best for now if we're not," and then I just quickly left before he could say anything else. I felt like a bit of a jerk saying it, but I guess it needed to be said and I'm glad I did it because he was overwhelming me slightly. So far it worked and I haven't actually seen him since then, but it has only been like 2 days. However, last night I got a rambling long letter through my door. It came quite late, so I'm almost hoping he was wasted or something when he delivered it because I think it's kind of weird and also vaguely insulting. I think I will type it out as it's difficult to explain the tone of the letter. So here it is. Dear, you didn't give me much chance to speak the other night and there is more I wanted to say, though this might actually be an easier way for me to explain my thoughts and feelings. I know we had only talked a few times before our tryst, but I felt like there was an obvious connection between us. I'm sure you must have felt it too, or I don't think you would have come home with me that night. I'm not the type of guy who sleeps with girls I don't really know, but I was extremely attracted to you and when it appeared you reciprocated my feelings, I couldn't help myself. When you told me you weren't interested in anything romantic, I understood, even if it was not what I wanted to hear. I don't know anything about your personal life, part of the reason why I am not usually interested in one-night stands, and so of course I realize why you might not be interested in me. However, I think it is strange you don't at least want to be friends. We shared a very intimate moment with each other and you can't pretend it never happened. It therefore seems only logical that we become friends. It only makes it more awkward if we aren't. I just want to say, if you feel embarrassed or worried that I think of you as immoral, don't be. I don't judge you. That would be a terrible double standard. Though be careful because some men may see your behavior as immoral, especially if you refuse to talk to them after. Just like when a guy doesn't call a girl after they sleep together, he's seen as a jerk. Really, the point of me saying all this is just to repeat that I understand you are not interested in a relationship with me and I respect that. However, I am just going to say it, I really like you. You're a fun, smart and a beautiful girl and I would love to get to know you more. I don't think you can deny that we got along very well before that night and I don't think what happened should change anything. Don't think you're leading me on. I'm a grown guy and I know that no means no and can handle just being friends with you. But, I respect what you said to me, even if it hurts a little, and will keep my distance from you for now. If you change your mind and if you ever want to talk to me or if you need anything, you know where I live and I will always welcome you. That's what neighbors are for, right? I do feel a bit bad because he obviously does like me and has put a lot of emotional value on what happened between us, but I just don't feel like I can deal with someone as intense as him. Maybe it's just me, but I do think that his letter has confirmed that he is a bit odd, so I am glad I said what I said and was upfront with him. I think he will leave me alone now. He is so far, though I hope if we do see each other we can be polite and it won't be too awkward, but it probably will. I was hopeful there would be no more updates to this because he managed to go for about a week without contacting me. I hadn't seen or heard from him for a few days, so I thought things were blowing over and he had got over it. Then yesterday afternoon I was getting some stuff out my car and I suddenly hear his voice say, "Hey, do you need a hand?" Of course we were going to see each other again at some point and I thought I was polite with him by just saying, "Hey, no, I'm fine, thanks." I really didn't think this was rude and I really didn't need any help anyway, but he seemed to get offended by it and started to get mad at me. He said something like, "What's your problem? I'm only trying to help you. All I've ever done is be nice to you, but you still act like a jerk." I think he said more, but I was kind of shocked at how he reacted. He stormed off before I could say anything, but I don't even know what I would have said as I was a bit stunned and also totally embarrassed because there were people around who probably heard it all. I was also a bit upset because I know that he is allowed to feel a bit used or whatever, as he obviously likes me more than I liked him, but I do think this outburst was uncalled for. I have made my feelings clear to him now and I know the truth hurts sometimes, but I don't think he has to take it out on me like this. This morning I woke up to another letter. This one is quite short and so I will type it out again. Dear, I want to apologize for shouting at you earlier. I let my anger get the better of me and I'm sorry about that, but I can't help but get frustrated at your behavior. I get that you're not interested in me and that you don't want to be my friend. Even if I do find it strange, you are aware of my feelings on this, so I won't repeat them. However, when someone is trying to help you, it is good manners to accept it, or at the very least, be grateful. Again, I'm sorry and I realize I need to think about the way I acted and will try not to do it again. By the way, this is how adults deal with awkward situations. They don't pretend they never happened. Hope you accept my apology and the little bit of advice I gave you. Maybe I should be grateful he apologized, but I almost think this letter is worse because he is not even trying to hide the insults and is totally patronizing. I don't know how to deal with him anymore. He seems to have gotten over his love for me but now has some grudge against me. If he really thinks all this about me, I don't even know why he even wants to talk to me and be friends. It must have been like a month since we had intimacy now anyway, so I don't know why he can't accept it and move on. I kind of want to talk to him again now, but I get the feeling that is what he wants me to do. Should I just ignore him and hope he gets bored when he realizes I won't give him any attention? Or should I tell him again, more assertively, that I want him to leave me alone? I'm so stressed about seeing him again though because I don't know what he's going to be like.
My brother-in-law pranked my girlfriend by pouring milk on her expensive dress, so I demanded he pay for the dress, or I would ruin his honeymoon. My sister recently got married to one of those "it's just a prank" bro. Guys, the guy is hysterical. He laughs at anything and everything he sees. He jokes, teases, makes fun, and always pulls nasty and cruel pranks. It's like he has no filter. Some said he was mentally ill, especially after he started telling jokes at his own father's funeral and almost caused my sister to get injured from his count the stairs prank. The family got our fair share of his ridiculous pranking campaign, and we've had enough, but to him, it's not enough. The kids love him and say he's fun, so that's one positive thing about him. The wedding was days ago. Once he learned I was bringing my girlfriend, whom he teased/pranked several times, he started commenting about pulling some funny pranks at the wedding. I told him I wouldn't react well and he could do what he did well with this information. He laughed me off, ha ha ha, and then I didn't see him until the wedding. After the ceremony and while the guests were eating, he saw my girlfriend and me standing, talking to several guests and mutual friends, and he approached us with a glass of milk in his hand. No idea why he had it. He kept commenting on my girlfriend and me. He invited me to propose to her right then, so his wedding will always overshadow the memory of my proposal. Then they said, "Relax, just a joke, bro," then laughed. My girlfriend stood beside me in her $700 dress when my brother-in-law pointed to the left and shouted, "Look, there's a dog over there." My girlfriend looked to the left, and the next thing I knew, he threw milk from his glass on her dress. It was a blue dress. My girlfriend was so shocked she froze. He started laughing, saying, "Gotcha." I was stunned, and then I asked what the hell he did that for. I lashed out at him as my girlfriend rushed to clean up, and I called him obnoxious and mean because he shouldn't have done that. He said he was just messing with us and that my girlfriend should feel lucky to have been served milk at a wedding, but my girlfriend was being too uptight and couldn't take a joke. She left looking angry and didn't respond to my calls. I was livid. After I argued with my brother-in-law, I left. The next day, I called him and my sister about what had happened and told them that I expected him to pay $700 for the dress he had ruined. He threw a fit, saying it was just a prank, and my sister said milk doesn't ruin a dress and said an apology should do it, but I said no and demanded he pay $700 after humiliating and getting my girlfriend wet and messy. My sister argued, saying that I was overprotective of my girlfriend, but I hung up, telling them they had until Friday. Ida? Edit 1, my girlfriend doesn't work. Her parents paid for her dress, so they're equally upset as her if not more. My sister said my girlfriend and her parents shouldn't be spending that much on a dress if they can't handle the possibility of it being ruined. Edit 2, my girlfriend is 20 years old. I offered to get the dress cleaned, but she said she no longer wanted it due to the bad memory attached to it since she wore it for the first time that day. She suffers from anxiety and depression, so I get why she no longer feels comfortable keeping it.
What situation made you say this is my life now? Shortly before my youngest daughter was born, we realized that we were going to need a bigger family vehicle. At the time, we had a small sedan and small crossover. They were good for a family of 4, but we were about to be a family of 5. We needed a minivan. We decided to trade in the sedan for a Toyota Sienna. Once we'd decided on the exact vehicle, my wife took the kids home. My youngest was about a month old, and I stayed at the dealer to do the paperwork. My wife was able to take the kids home because, since there were 5 of us at that point, we had to drive separately to the dealer. A few hours later, it took them a long time, because it was the last weekend before Christmas and they had their D-crew in. I drove home in a brand new vehicle. It was the first time I bought a completely new, not used, vehicle. It had a new car smell that didn't come from an air freshener. The next day, I put in a booster seat for my son, and an infant carrier for my youngest daughter. We were ready for our first family trip, all in the same vehicle. I believe we went to Target and back. After the trip, I looked at the back seat of my new van, and noticed that my kids had left some stuff behind. No worries, I took it in for them. After the next trip, the same thing happened. That time, I had my kids who were old enough to walk go back to the minivan to get their stuff. I was their parent, not their servant. The next trip, the same thing happened. Within a week, one of the kids had spilled goldfish crackers in the back. My infant also spit up on the floor somehow. An impressive feat for an infant who was strapped into a rear-facing car seat. The new car smell lasted less than a week. Same for the new car clean. That was almost 8 years ago now. The van still runs well, since I keep it well maintained, but no amount of maintenance can keep the back of the van clean against the daily onslaught of children. Over the first few months of owning that brand new van, I had to lower the bar for clean, thanks to my kids. This is my life now, I thought to myself. It wasn't the minivan that bothered me. It was the mess in the back from my kids. Unless I get the van detailed every few months, it will never be clean. It will only be less dirty than before. Besides the grimy carpets and seats in the back, there are currently no fewer than a dozen face masks, at least 4 water bottles, various papers from school. Mostly projects that my children wanted to take out of their book bags for some reason. About 50 Pokemon cards, food wrappers, stickers, 3 big pumpkins, for carving this weekend, but they've been in the back of my van for 2 weeks now. My folding chair, for watching my kids at their sporting events. 2 umbrellas, I think. Last spring, one of my coworkers drove me to a meeting we both had to attend. She had no kids. I was impressed with how clean her car was. I was convinced it was new, because it was so clean and even still smelled nice. It was, in fact, 2 years old. But she had no kids, so it was easy to keep her car clean. I took my terminally ill friend's virginity before she passed. Today is her 1-year anniversary since she passed and I can't stop thinking about her. She was my friend for 6 years. Her cancer came back aggressively. She told us she doesn't want to go through chemo again, so she planned to enjoy the time she had left. Before that, she was also kind of a homebody who was only close to a small group of friends, which was us. One night when we were all drinking, she admitted to me she was still a virgin, but she doesn't want to lose it to just any stranger. At least somebody she trusts before she goes. That person was me. She didn't force me to do anything I didn't want to. She asked but was willing to drop it and pretend it never happened if I decided no. We decided to make it extra special. Got a nice hotel room, got those fake candles all over the room to make it more romantic. Was the first time I ever had sex with someone I loved but wasn't in love with, if that makes sense. It was still a very intense experience. Not in a bad way. There was still lots of emotions. Even though she seemed so happy she got to lose her virginity to someone she trusts, part of me wonders if I did take advantage. If I was wrong for saying yes. It's just hard because I miss her so much. But I'm still glad at least I got to give her something before she left. People who came back from war and found their partners gone. What happened afterwards? I first met my wife in high school, and for me, it was love at first sight. She was like the shining sun and I loved spending time with her. She was also friends with literally everyone at the school and never let me feel lonely. Once we were in our senior year, we started officially dating and I did my best to spend time with her. We would go on dates almost every week and it really felt like I was going to spend my entire life with her. Now, I had always dreamed of enlisting in the army along with my best friend, Ryan. We were both tomorrow doesn't exist type of boys and wanted to serve our country in battle. Once I told my girlfriend about this, she panicked and became fearful for our relationship. She said that if I was deployed and came back, I wouldn't want her anymore. I tried easing her worries by showing how committed I was, but nothing worked, so in the end I married her at the courthouse. We had just turned 18, but that didn't matter to me because I knew she was the one. Anyway, a few months later me and Ryan enlisted and were deployed to Afghanistan. I promised my girlfriend that I would keep sending her money that we could eventually use to buy a house for us, and I just did that. While I don't like to speak much about what happened when I was deployed, I can tell you that they weren't the glory days that Ryan and I had dreamed about. But the one event that I will speak about is this one night when we got raided. There were constant explosions going off around us and my ears kept ringing forever. Somewhere along the line, a grenade landed near Ryan and I saw his leg get blown off. I immediately grabbed him and started carrying him over to the medics. Before we could reach safety, I turned to check on my best friend and his brain was bleeding out onto my clothes. I couldn't sleep at all that night, or the night after. I was eventually sent to the trauma hospital since my nightmares about that moment weren't stopping at all. When I returned home, my parents cried for me and reluctantly handed me an envelope. My wife had filed for divorce and already gotten a new boyfriend for the months I was in the trauma hospital. I was devastated. I loved this woman and couldn't believe what she had done to me. All the money I was sending home as savings was also gone just like her. I was alone, in an empty apartment. I somehow got a job as a mechanic to make ends meet, but deep down I didn't even feel like I was alive. I stopped caring about my body or anything at all, and became severely depressed. The nightmares about Ryan would sometimes come back and haunt me. Within 2 years, I had turned from a happy, outgoing man to a completely isolated person. I weighed 250 pounds and couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. Heck, I was even ashamed to go visit my parents because I knew I had disappointed them. I couldn't walk up a simple flight of stairs without feeling like my heart was going to burst. This continued for a few more years, but then one day I saw an interview on the internet with a World War II veteran. For some reason, the things he said and the way he still smiled after seeing those horrors told me that I needed to get my life back on track. I got back to working out and did everything the army teaches you to lose weight. I hired a personal trainer to keep me on track and he praised my workout performance but said my appetite needed to change. I admitted to him that I had trouble controlling my hunger. He advised me to track my calories through MyFitnessPal and to take purity drops to suppress my appetite. And the moment I started taking purity drops, the urge to eat was going away almost immediately. I was able to hit my caloric goals on MyFitnessPal and kept myself in a deficit consistently. Sometimes, yeah, I folded again and ate a cinnamon roll when I shouldn't have, but I trusted the use of the purity drops to get back on the saddle and more importantly, I trusted myself. Eventually after 8 months I lost 40 pounds and I couldn't be happier than ever. Things got so good to the point where I could hardly remember my ex-wife's face. I decided I've officially gotten over her. I was a lot slimmer and I hadn't been with a woman in years so I got myself back out there. I'm going to keep going until I see the man I once was in the mirror. Mess with me and I'll have your wife get you back. About a year ago, I had a messy falling out with a friend. We weren't super close, but we'd known each other for a while. This friend had a history of some light substance abuse problems that had caused issues in his life before, like losing jobs and having messy breakups. But on a personal level, he was generally fun to hang out with. However, his old problems started resurfacing. It began when he treated his ex-girlfriend quite poorly, and she also happened to be a friend of mine. His stories about what happened and why just didn't add up, they were pretty much full of lies. Over the course of 2 months, his behavior became concerning, to say the least. So, I decided to talk to him about it all, but he was combative, and things ended in a heated argument that marked the end of our friendship. Mutual friends had mixed feelings about the situation at first, but as time went on, they too distanced themselves from him. Throughout this whole ordeal, he accused me of trying to tarnish his reputation, and he was vocal about it to our friends and anyone who would listen. Honestly, I wasn't bothered by it. I figured people would eventually see his true colors, which they did. Then, the other night, I happened to spot him in a local restaurant. He was on a date with a much younger woman. I asked the restaurant owner, a friend of mine, about her, and I found out she was his new girlfriend. She didn't live in town, so she traveled quite a distance to see him. Now, it was time for a little payback. The restaurant was crowded because there was a soccer game on, and he was into soccer, and so was his date. My partner came up with a mischievous plan. She excused herself, headed to the bar, and paid the bill for my ex-friend's table. The waitress asked who was paying, and my partner dropped the bombshell, saying, "I'm his wife." She came back to our table and told me what she'd done. When the game was over, he asked the waitress for the bill, and she promptly informed him that his wife had taken care of it. His new lady friend was visibly upset, to say the least. There was a heated argument, she slapped him, and then she hurriedly left the restaurant. I'm Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Ask me anything. What's the biggest way an individual can contribute to the climate solution? You are a voter, a consumer, a giver and a worker. In every one of those roles you can help. Buying an electric car helps. There will be options to pay a bit extra to offset your travel emissions coming soon. I do this for all of my emissions and my family. We need support on climate from both parties in the US and in all countries. Staying hopeful is a good thing. What's your view on veganism/plant-based diets as a means to reduce climate impact? How can this be educated to people on a wider scale on how to make this choice? For people who want to go vegan, that is great, but I don't think most people will do that. There are companies making beef in new ways and people working to still use cows but reduce the methane emissions. I have backed a number of innovators in this space including Beyond and Impossible in Memphis. I think eventually these products will be very good even though their share is small today. With the benefit of hindsight regarding your years of involvement with Microsoft, what is the single biggest thing you wish you had done differently? I was CEO until 2000. I certainly know a lot now that I didn't back then. 2 areas I would change would be our work in phone operating systems, Android One, and trying to settle the antitrust lawsuit sooner. If you could be 25 again, what would you do differently? When I was 25, I didn't believe in vacations. I didn't believe in weekends. I pushed everyone around me to work very long hours, which is how I worked, too. But as I got older, and especially once I became a father, I realized that there's more to life than work. Don't wait as long as I did to learn this lesson. Take time to nurture your relationships, celebrate your successes, and recover from your losses. Take a break when you need to. Take it easy on the people around you when they need it. 2. You're not a slacker if you cut yourself some slack. What are you excited about in the year ahead? First, being a grandfather. Second, being a good friend and father. Third, progress in health and climate innovation. Fourth, helping to shape AI advances in a positive way. Why are you so focused on healthcare and vaccines? When I saw that kids were dying who could be saved for less than $1,000 per life, I knew that had to be the top priority for my giving back. There was almost no one funding work on diseases like malaria, which was killing over 1 million kids a year then. We have made progress, but it is still 400K and we are committed to get it to zero eventually. Isn't it contradictory to be a humanitarian and then accumulate most scarce resource land under one? Everything I own will be sold as money moves into the foundation. In the meantime, my investment group tries to invest in productive assets including farmland, although that is less than 4% of the total. Why are you buying up so much farmland? Do you think this is a problem with billionaire wealth and how much you can disproportionately acquire? I own less than 1/4,000th of the farmland in the US. I have invested in these farms to make them more productive and create more jobs. There isn't some grand scheme involved. In fact, all these decisions are made by a professional investment team. In terms of the very rich, I think they should pay a lot more in taxes and they should give away their wealth over time. It has been very fulfilling for me and is my full-time job. In the Netflix documentary series, one thing that was quite remarkable to me was how you and your team were able to design a nuclear reactor that already uses nuclear waste as a fuel. However, this design was never implemented due to political reasons. My question is, given that this technology has the potential to be the most effective green energy source and have a key role in reversing climate change, what's the current status on the project? Is it a likely possibility that this nuclear reactor will be built in the upcoming years? If so, do you plan on building in China or would you consider building such a project on US soil? We are still working on this. At first the project was a US-China joint venture, but the US cancelled that. So now we are building the demo reactor in Wyoming where a coal plant is closing. It is very promising in terms of the cost and safety advances. If things go well, a lot of these reactors will help solve climate change. Eventually we want reactors globally, but the first ones will be in the US, even though competing with natural gas electricity is hard here. What forced your school to change their outdated policies? My time studying history in Germany was filled with awesome experiences, but one particular encounter with an African exchange student stands out. His name was Kwame, and he came from a small village in Ghana. Kwame had a thick accent and struggled to express his thoughts effectively in written German. One day, as the deadline for a crucial assignment approached, he went to our history professor, Professor Mullah, and asked if he could write the assignment in English, explaining that he felt more comfortable expressing himself in that language. Professor Mullah hesitated for a moment. He was well aware that his own understanding of the English language was shaky, and he didn't want to admit this to his students. Instead, he decided to reference the university guidelines, which stipulated that, except for language studies, all assignments were to be written in either German or Latin. Kwame accepted this response and went back to his dorm room to work on the assignment. What Professor Mullah didn't know was that Kwame's education back in Ghana included several years studying in a Jesuit monastery, where Latin was a part of his curriculum. Kwame turned in his assignment in flawless Latin. When Professor Mullah received the assignment, he was taken aback. He realized he would need help to assess the content and quality of Kwame's work. He had to reach out to the university's Latin department and enlisted the help of a Latin professor to grade the assignment. When the assignment was finally returned to Kwame, he had earned a top grade. It was a moment of pride not only for Kwame but also for our entire history program. The story of Kwame's Latin assignment became legendary, and it didn't take long for the university to amend its guidelines. Within a year, the rule specifying that assignments could be written in Latin was revised, allowing only students specifically studying Latin to submit assignments in that language. What shit did your parents use to pull that left you baffled? Whenever I or my sister had company over, my mom would be sitting in the room with us and monopolize the entire conversation. Then, she would proceed to scold us for being too quiet and tell us that's why you don't have any friends and nobody likes to come over.
Ruin my wedding with your ego? Let's see how you like it when I do the same. Last summer I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife Emma didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it at the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding, and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen, displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple light-hearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant, and that she'd just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide? Her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loud that everyone else was drowned out. Apparently Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle. I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore.
My mother just confirmed that she intentionally broke up me and my ex. My ex-boyfriend and I were together for just over 3 years. We broke up because our parents, my mother, his father, got engaged. They pulled a lot of crap, but I'm going to try and condense it. They spent months referring to us as siblings and introducing us to people as our children, and constantly joking about us as though we were full-blood relatives when there's not even a distant relation. When they got engaged, there came even more comments about how we were going to be a regular nuclear family, with a married couple and their children, and mom telling me I should think of my ex and his sister as my siblings. A bit before the breakup, I had a pregnancy scare. I told my mom, who said it was good I wasn't pregnant because how will you explain to the grandbabies that you have the same parents? They got engaged and had an engagement party where my ex wasn't in attendance, but I was. At the party, my mother gave a speech and said, "Thanks to our children, ex and op, for helping create this wonderful little family unit of ours. Aside from your incest." I then had to deal with that for the rest of the party and ex, and I wound up breaking up within a week because now our entire extended family and family friends were joking about it. The wedding was on Valentine's Day. We hadn't spoken since the breakup, but ex contacted me and asked how I wanted to handle it, and we agreed either we both go or neither of us go. We both flip-flopped back and forth on if we were going or not, but ultimately agreed to go because it would look worse if we didn't go at all, and we were both asked to be in the wedding party. It went about the same as any other wedding would go, right up until the DJ said that our parents wanted to dedicate a song to their children. And then he played Sweet Home Alabama. Cue laughter. Me and ex left after that, but my mom followed. She said it was just a joke, we didn't need to get all huffy about it, and begged us to come back inside. We refused and stood outside while we waited for the next bus. Then we got to talking, and long story short, we agreed to pick up where we left off, as we'd been apart a few months but all the feelings were still there. We'd not had any other relationships in this time, and he even still had stuff at my place. We agreed that it was stupid of us to let other people dictate our relationship, and also agreed to severely limit contact with our parents this time around. Not full no contact, but very, very low contact. We've also booked some sessions with a couples counselor starting Sunday. Today my mom asked me to meet her for coffee, and I went, thinking that this would be a perfect time to tell her we're back together, talk about boundaries, and initiate the very, very low contact my boyfriend and I had agreed on. However, I ran through the rain to get there and didn't think to touch up the concealer I'd put on the hickey my boyfriend left on my neck last night. Mom immediately sees it and asks where it's from. I was about 2 seconds away from George glassing her, but then she says it's from your brother, isn't it? I then snap, he's not my brother. She now knows everything she needs to know and basically says that she's been married less than a week and I'm already trying to ruin it. I got a bit upset and responded that she essentially ruined my relationship of 3 years in favor of her relationship of less than 18 months, and we've only just started rebuilding what they ruined. She then says clearly we didn't do a good enough job if you're already mending it. I directly asked if she was trying to break us up. She admitted that she and my new stepdad had entered into their relationship with the sole intention of ending ours because we said once, in passing, that we had been looking at houses a bit under an hour away so we could have a garden for future kids, and they didn't want to have to drive a 2-hour round trip to see us. When they realized they actually liked each other / wanted to get married, they then became even more committed to ending our relationship because they'd rather we were heartbroken than let their friends and family think that they were odd. So this whole thing started as a way to make sure we didn't move an hour away from them, and now it's them trying to make sure their friends and family don't think they're weird. My mom left an hour ago. My boyfriend is at work right now, phone off, totally oblivious. I am still at the coffee place writing this in a state of shock. What do I do with this information? I know I need to tell my boyfriend when he gets off work, but how do we approach either parent going forward, or begin to deal with this whole thing?
Hey shy people, what is your worst experience? While going to college, I interned for the state's largest business development corporation. In a meeting with C-suite executives, the top dog was just making friendly conversation before we got started and asked me what classes I was taking. To set the picture, I am just the peon note-taker and would never expect anyone to even notice that I was there. Let alone put me on the spot with a long table of successful professionals staring at me. I blacked out. Zero brain function. I mumbled a few inaudible grunts and ums before having no choice but to admit that I couldn't remember. Oh my dog, the looks of confusion and the awkward century that it took to switch topics amongst themselves still haunts me before bed. Went to a party. Guy I've never met walks up to me, shakes my hand, and says, "Hello, what's your name? Where were you born? Where will you die? What's in between?" Not letting go of my hand the whole time, I completely locked up, had no idea what to say. What made the popular guy girl lose their popularity? Freshman year of high school. Very popular guy who was the it kid, freshman phenom wide receiver on a nationally ranked team. We were all leaving class one day. He randomly decided it was a good idea to make fun of a very well-loved handicapped guy who was dying of his condition, some advanced form of water on the brain if I remember correctly, and even decided to punch him. This knocked the poor kid to the ground. About 10 guys immediately jumped him. A shop teacher saw it, the WR getting his, happened and let it continue for a minute before stopping things. Mr. Popular got quite messed up in that short window. Kicked off team. Expelled. Moved schools in a move that I'm guessing was a way to start over at a new school. Never heard from him again. Went from pep rally king to degenerate outcast in 5 minutes. I had a front row seat and was one of 50 plus who testified to the school admins. The victim passed away later that school year from his condition. You almost never heard him speak, but when he did he was always kind and thoughtful.
My boyfriend is mad at me for refusing to wake up and have intimacy at 4 a.m. Last night/early this morning, I was sleeping while was in the living room, drinking and listening to music. He came in the bedroom at 4 a.m. and asked me if I have ever been roped, which I told him I have a fantasy about being taken advantage of/role playing that out with him. I was asleep and said no means no, I'm sleeping and don't want to have intimacy. He got annoyed and said to get my fantasies in order and was talking crap under his breath. I could hear him. He then gets up, puts intimate videos on his phone and shines the flashlight in my face saying he's gonna take care of himself, but wants to bust on my chest. I woke up, annoyed, and said no, I am sleeping. He got pissed off at me, said that he will remember this and left the room, slamming the door. He was obviously drunk, because he drank all of the alcohol we had in the house, not too much, but even my 1/4 finished drink from the night. I know this is not okay. But I honestly think there is something wrong with him. I guess I'm not looking for advice, but looking to see if I just should have let him finish. He told me I should have just stayed asleep, instead I woke up with an attitude. Wouldn't anyone?
Found out my husband has been cheating on me with a catfish. This proved my dad was right, that nobody would ever truly love me. I have been with my husband since 1995, or was with him since 1995, going on 29 years. My entire life has been wasted. I just found out that my husband, who I loved, the one that I had to get over a ridiculous amount of deep-seated childhood trauma in order to trust, it was all pointless. For a week I kept getting this sick feeling and something was telling me to check his phone. I don't do that, so I ignored it, and that urge, of whatever it was, kept getting stronger, and so I finally checked. It physically made me sick. I've never felt so damn worthless, disposable, unloved in my life. I really think I would feel better if he'd actually been meeting someone and having an old-fashioned, cheap intimate affair. He's been being catfished for about the last month. It took 3 seconds and a reverse image search to find 14 more profiles on every platform, including some online adult services sites. The sweet, caring and loving messages me sent her, that's what I wanted more than anything. I've been trying so damn hard to be more laid back. I'm a type A with an anxiety disorder, to be more supportive, less critical and more patient. I even told him, I know I can be short and pushy sometimes, but I'm making a conscious effort to be less stressed and cause less stress. He accepted my apology. I've been doing as I promised, but now I don't know why. What was the point? He knows my trauma came from not so much the beatings as a kid, but the mind games my father would play while kicking my butt. One of his favorites was, nobody loves you. They never have, never will. You'll grow up one day and even your husband will figure out he could have done better. I don't like going into detail about everything from back then, but that I explained clearly and told him I couldn't handle being made to feel that my father had been right. I told him, if you want to step out, man up and tell me what's going on. I could handle that. It would hurt, but it would be better than being blindsided with the realization that my father had been right. He told me he wouldn't do that if he even thought about it. He'd leave me first. He didn't do that. My love language has always been small trinkets. I'm happy with a card, just a little something that says, I was thinking about you when I saw this. That tiny little thing once or twice a month and I'd be over the moon. It's been a few months now since I've got one, but I saw where he's transferred the catfish of over $500 since July 26th. She got the sweetest messages just to reply, okay, love you, so he'd send more money. I would have killed to be talked to that way, and he keeps piling it on with her and getting nothing back. He's convinced he's going to leave our life in the southeast United States to go live with her in the upper northeast. He's never met her, or him, whatever. I was speechless. In 45 years, I had never been speechless until earlier tonight. I don't like the feeling. Why am I not good enough? I try and be a friend I'd want. I try and help as many people as I can because I know the feeling of not having help and feeling abandoned. I can't do that to anyone. I'm not a saint, or perfect by any means, but I couldn't do that to anyone, especially him. I feel so dumb. He did exactly what he promised not to do. I feel like everything was sucked out of my chest cavity the second all the air left the room. What in the world did I do that this is my punishment? My life has been wasted. I even messaged her and asked did she know about me. I felt that I needed to know that. She did. She said it didn't matter though because it was just money. No feelings were involved. My feelings were though. I always thought I'd rather have a bad day with him than a great day with someone else. I guess he did not concur after all. I know it sounds insane, but I feel like I would have rather had my butt beaten than this. I was tossed like garbage for nothing at all. He proved my father right all these years later. I couldn't go my entire life without admitting he was right. I just wanted to vent. I don't know what to do from here. I'm afraid I'll lose it and I'll be a blubbering idiot while he's in the house. I can't do that right now. I don't have anyone to talk to be able to wrap my head around anything. My entire life has been wasted. I did it all for nothing. It was just a lie. And I was so damn stupid I never even suspected anything. Thanks for letting me whine. I don't feel better, but I'm over the first hurdle of letting someone know.
What's something boys can never tell their girlfriends? 1. I actually watched this episode without you when you passed out last night. 2. That you wouldn't date her if she was a worm. 3. How much money I actually spend on these tools. 4. The real answer to the question. What are you thinking about when I doze off? You would never believe me if I said I was thinking about how bike tires are made. 5. I want my hoodie back. 6. I need space from her sometimes and it's not because she did something wrong. 7. The guy she tells us not to worry about really worries us. 8. How gorgeous they are. Never comes out right. It's never as much as you want it to be. 9. I don't hate my exes and I don't think they're monsters. There are reasons I dated them. 10. We're concerned about you just up and leaving us. That you're actually 3 toddlers in a trench coat. 12. Which one? 13. About the secret rituals we do together. We aren't supposed to tell anyone about them. 14. Never ever ever tell her to calm down. 15. Where I buried me treasure. 16. Yes, that girl that we passed on the beach in that bathing suit was attractive. 17. Who would win? Batman versus Batman. She wouldn't believe me if I told her. 18. What the boys are saying in the group chat. 19. That any other woman in the world is, or has ever been, attractive. 20. Exactly 14 years ago, I woke up for you on a weekend. I was watching an episode of Batman the Animated Series. You woke up halfway through the episode and picked up the remote and changed the channel. You knew I was watching and I never got to see the end of the episode. I'm still salty about it. 21. That her sister is more attractive. 22. About their throwaway Reddit account. 23. The only thing a good guy said to me that he shouldn't have is when we went out to a nice Valentine's Day dinner at my favorite Indian restaurant. We got all dressed up, which was not our usual style as underpaid retail workers. We were having a wonderful time, and he said, yeah, my ex and I came here for Valentine's Day once. Totally ruined the moment for me. I thought it was so special, but he'd been there, done that. 24. Babe, you're being a little unreasonable here. 25. This is a trap. Nice try, girlfriends.
Guys of Reddit who have rejected someone, what's the worst way someone has taken it? A girl at work started playing some aggressive footsie at work. When I pushed her foot away and gave her a look, she went on to tell me I'm not as attractive as I think I am and that I should start dating girls in my own league. I dated a girl for a week when I realized she just wasn't my type and I wasn't hers, so I told her we would go our ways. Her way, however, was to stalk me for 3 effing years because we were meant to be together for life. Highlights were making fake internet accounts of other girls I dated in those 3 years and knowing frightening much about me and these girls while writing me, impersonating them, calling every day. When I changed numbers she called every other person in my life she had the number of, trying to date people I know in my life, making weird collages of me and her on Facebook, making up fake stories of her and me and many more. Thank God it became less and less after long and exhausting talks I had with her to make her stop on and on again. Didn't hear from her since 2015.
Ask me to be your sugar mommy? Enjoy getting deported, and explaining that to your wife and kid. I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate type job in a field with lots of room for growth and I'm recently back into the dating scene after a decade. I'm kind of a would-be a 10 if she lost 30 pounds looking girl, beautiful face if a bit chubby, but I never have issues getting a date. I'm not well off but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large multicultural city and my ex was an immigrant so I'm open to dating people of any origin. What happened? A few weeks ago I met a very charming man from a Latin American country only a couple years younger than me. Seemed very sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, educated and in a good profession back home in his country and had a lot in common with me. Chemistry seemed amazing inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa but hoping to stay. I made it clear I wouldn't be able to help him with that but we'd have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, only then would we consider a real relationship. Then the other shoe dropped. A couple weeks and 4 dates in, during a text conversation about my work, he asked me to be his sugar mommy. I initially laughed and assumed it was a joke. He kept pushing and clearly said it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask until I hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking he was serious about it. No apology for being hurtful to me. Obviously what I did next was take screenshots and cry about it to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking he liked me and that he thought I needed to pay for a man. My friends started the fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more on his online presence. Together we found about 6 different Instagram accounts that were him using different variations of his name and different photos of himself all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern. All very scammy and suspicious looking. He'd been foolish enough on one of his profiles though to follow and tag the employer that he was working for illegally on his tourist visa in my country. What's the most awful parent you've ever had to deal with at a parent-teacher conference? Not my story, but my dad's. He's a high school teacher and a couple of years ago he had a student whose mom insisted he was legally a genius. She had apparently bullied and berated school and school board officials for many years and had a whole string of lawsuits associated with her by the time her son got to my dad's class. The end result was that she'd gotten her kid to skip several grades and he was 12 when he started high school. Now, sure, there are maybe some kids who can handle this, but here's the twist. Even though the son was still a genius, he'd gotten into a car accident at some point that had done severe brain damage and he was now slightly less of a genius than he was before. According to mom, he'd lost something like 20 IQ points. But, again, still a genius, even accounting for brain damage. So, son shows up in class and it's obvious from the beginning he's struggling. Because not only is he 2 grades ahead of where he should be to begin with, mom also insisted he be put in honors and accelerated classes. Which also means that he's in class with mostly sophomores and juniors, who want absolutely nothing to do with a 12-year-old. After about 2 weeks, son has totally given up. He puts his head down and sleeps through class or plays video games on his phone. When my dad confiscates the phone for the period, mom goes nuts. Part of his special brain damage genius learning plan is that he is supposed to be allowed to use a screen device to help take notes. Mom says her son is being discriminated against and threatens to show up and sit in on my dad's classes every day and bring her 4 huge service dogs with her. My dad tells her she is always welcome to come and observe a class, so she can see son's behavior. Her only response was to basically tell him to lawyer up. Things keep going along like this for the whole year and none of son's behavior could possibly be the result of an overbearing mother, or the fact that he had no friends because he's 12, or the fact that maybe the classes were too challenging for him, or any of that, because he's a genius. It got to the point where every parent-teacher conference had to have a moderator and a school board lawyer present. In the end, the poor kid got a B, because my dad was essentially told he couldn't fail him and a B was the lowest grade the mom would accept and they really just wanted him to hurry up and graduate so the mom would finally leave them alone. The worst part was, the kid was a good, nice, funny, smart kid. He just had no business being in the classes his mom insisted he get put in. If he were in his own grade, or even just a grade ahead, he probably would have been the top of his class and had his own friends. He really seemed to like my dad, too. Even his mom kept saying she didn't understand because son came home every night saying my dad's was his favorite class. I just felt so bad for the poor kid. Finally got back at my ex-girlfriend who dumped me because of my size and destroyed my self-esteem. My ex and I had been together since we were 20, we grew together, became better partners, tackled problems, and were each other's first everything. But, out of nowhere, she dumped me last year, saying she wanted to explore better options. I was confused because our intimate life was great, 7 to 10 times a week. I'm a high libido guy in my physical prime, so it didn't make sense to me. She said she wanted to try bigger guys and that just shattered my self-confidence. I tried to convince her to stay but it didn't work. I reckon her friends influenced her. They're what you'd call size queens. I'm 5.9 inches and knowing it's slightly above average didn't help my confidence. After that, I became really self-conscious and lost my confidence around women. I was once a lively, outgoing guy but after the breakup, I felt like a shell of my old self. A few months ago, my close friend introduced me to this girl. She's caring, loving, and our personalities clicked instantly. She is more experienced than me and had been a huge help to get over my trauma. We've explored new levels of intimacy, which I never thought was possible before, and I started regaining my self-esteem. Then, out of the blue, my ex messaged me from a friend's number. I had blocked her everywhere, saying she regretted leaving and wanted to get back together. I didn't reply. My new girlfriend noticed I was upset and asked what was going on. After I told her, she laughed and told me to get my best suits and clothes. I asked what she wants to do and she just told me to do what she said. She made me wear those suits and pose. She took my photos and short videos with her camera and I did the same for her. She also got dressed up. Then, she edited the photos and videos to mimic a meme video that parodies a Dior ad with Robert Pattinson. It was awesome. She told me to send it as the reply to my ex's message. I did it and after a few days everyone in our friend group had been talking about it. Apparently my friend found the video hilarious and sent it to everyone. Now, everyone's calling me a legend for that response and my ex, along with her size queen friends, has been silent and avoids me at gatherings. But the true legend here is my new girlfriend. She might see this post since she's a regular on Reddit. V, if you're reading this, I love you. What's the worst tantrum a customer has thrown in your store? I used to work for Goodyear Tire and Auto Stores and one day, a man, 40s, well-dressed, came in wanting an alignment done on his truck. When they told him the price, he got upset and said that he had purchased a lifetime alignment from us and would not be paying. Our sales guy explained calmly that Goodyear does not, and has never sold lifetime alignments, but Firestone does, and perhaps he is mistaken. The man became furious, insisting that we perform his alignment because he paid for a lifetime alignment, and that if we don't he will sue for breach of contract. Manager gets involved. There's no calming this guy down. He has us check our system and he's never even been to a Goodyear store before at all. That just made it worse, etc. The next few minutes was him yelling incomprehensibly at our manager, other customers in the lounge, demanding action be taken on his vehicle. Finally the manager says he's calling the cops and the guy goes on a full-blown profanity-induced rampage through our store on the way to the door, knocking over coffee dispensers and cups, a magazine rack, and ends it by kicking open our door. The kick ripped the hydraulic door closer off the wall above the door, and he left. Our manager ran into him a week later at a car dealership, and it turns out he was a sales manager there. Our manager walked out and cited that guy's behavior as the reason they just lost a sale. Then he forwarded the security cam video of his rampage to the GM of the dealership. Not sure what happened to him, but we never saw him again. Am I the a-hole for never telling my mother what my aunt was doing to me? My mom had me when she and my father were both 13. I was close to my mother at first, but then she became neglectful. When I was 13 my aunt moved in with me and my mother. My aunt arped me and it messed me up. My grades dropped. I started screaming at mom and blaming how she used to act for how I acted. I got into fights at school and I was so afraid of my aunt to the point where I'd start cuddling with my mom all night just to stay away from her. When I was 16, my aunt got pregnant and she moved away with a friend a week later. She came over once after the baby David was born. When my mom went out for a little bit my aunt decided to rope me once more and made me hold him and took a photo of us and said I should hold my son while I can. Then she moved with David to Taiwan and started living with a cousin. I have tried to forget everything she did to me. I graduated with honors and I got a wonderful job. I have tried to make my mom proud. I just got her a car and she calls my fiancé the daughter she never had. My fiancé is the only one I told this because I had to let her know. Apparently last Monday, my aunt got intoxicated and told the cousin everything she did to me and about me being David's father. She got kicked out right away and my mom was told everything by the cousin. My mom had a breakdown and she asked me if she was really so horrible that I couldn't tell her this happened to me. She yelled that she would have been able to help, but because I didn't know her grandson is stuck with a monster. She kicked me out, saying I never must have forgiven her for how she used to act. I've talked to my fiancée about it and she has said my mom just needs time and can't fathom the idea that she has a grandson she can't help.
Who's the stupidest person you've ever met, and what story perfectly sums up their stupidity? There was this guy at my high school that wasn't too bright and was mostly harmless, but about halfway through decided he was gonna be a thug. One day he goes into a class of first years when their teacher wasn't there and robs all their electronics, cash and valuables at knife point without covering his face, and before he left gave them his real name, saying, "And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that stole all your stuff." He then proceeded to leave school grounds with all the stolen stuff but decides against stashing it off campus, and so came back with all the stolen stuff in his backpack and went back to spy on the class with his backpack full of loot while police officers were there taking statements to make sure they weren't ratting him out. The kids all rat him out, and when he hears his name he steps into the class proclaiming he'd got them if they didn't take back, saying he did it. With the officer still in the class and all his loot on his back, he was expelled and arrested, and when word got to our year group everyone just facepalmed.
My traitor lesbian ex went to get the milk and just came back 3 years later. My ex-wife came out as lesbian and left me and my daughters 3 years ago. And now she's back. 3 years ago my wife came out as lesbian. We've been together for many years. In fact, our oldest daughter was 14 at the time and my youngest was 10. Our life was good. Both me and my wife worked, so we had stable finances and I thought we were happy. That was until one evening my wife sat us down and explained that she was in love with a female colleague from her workplace and that she wanted to be with her. She said she was sorry but she had to find out who she was and that would only be possible if she'd left her old life behind her, blah blah blah. The typical breakup nonsense. On that day she left us and cut contact. For me and my daughters, the world fell apart. I knew that I now had to take care of my daughters all by myself. I was in a state of depression for a long time, but I kept fighting for my daughters. Every attempt to contact my ex-wife failed. Luckily I found a much better paying job that made it possible for me to give them the world. My daughters had good grades in school and I knew that our life would soon be better again. But once in a while when I took my youngest daughter to bed she asked if I would leave them like mom. I hugged her and gave her a kiss on the forehead and promised her that I would never leave them and that I loved them more than anything in the world. I was so angry at my ex-wife because she was the one that gave her those feelings. I wonder if she ever realized what she had done to our daughters. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. My daughters and I sat in the living room and I told them that because Christmas month was already next month, they should write down what they wanted for Christmas. My oldest daughter is now 17 and my youngest is now 13. While they were busy writing, the doorbell rang and I wondered who it was. When I opened the door, I froze in shock. It was my ex-wife with a big smile on her face. She said she was happy to see me and she tried to hug me, but I refused to hug her. My oldest daughter then came up behind me and asked me who it was, and when she saw her mother her facial expression immediately changed. I've never seen her so angry. My ex-wife tried to apologize and she wanted to hug her, but my daughter pushed her away and shouted at her to leave and that she never ever wants to see her again. Then my youngest daughter also joined us. She just got angry too, turned around and went to her bedroom. Then my oldest one followed her to comfort her. From the look on her face, I figured she was ashamed, as she should be. I asked what she wanted. She said that the last 3 years weren't good years for her. She constantly thought of her daughters and wanted to see them again, but for some reason, she never came by because she was expecting this exact response from them. But she guessed that she deserved this. She asked if I could talk to them. I told her that I could tell them she was sorry and let them decide, but I would not push them into doing anything they didn't want. She was okay with that and left. She also left me her new number to contact her. I then got into my daughter's room. She cried in the arms of her older sister. I told them what their mother had told me. I told them that if they'd want to meet her they could do that. It would be okay for me. My oldest daughter said that she could not forgive her for doing what she did and that I was everything they needed. It felt good to hear this. Really good. I always thought that being a single parent would mean that I might never be enough for my children. Hearing this made me so happy. My youngest daughter then said that she always thought she missed her mother, but now that she had seen her again she never wants to see her again. I texted my ex-wife about that. She read it but she didn't respond. But she didn't give up that easily. She showed up to our house once more while my daughters played ping pong outside. I was in the living room watching TV when I suddenly heard loud shouting outside of the house. I immediately got there and I saw my oldest daughter arguing with my ex-wife. My oldest daughter shouted at her that she had no idea what she did to me. She told her about how depressed I was and everything I went through. This was kind of surprising because I wanted my daughters to feel secure with me, so I've never told them of my depression and the suffering I went through. Then she continued how she felt over the years knowing that her mother left her and that she'll never forgive her. My 13-year-old was crying while that happened, so I hugged and comforted her, but I also didn't want to interfere because if my oldest daughter wanted to tell her mother anything, I'm not going to stop her just to protect my ex-wife's feelings. Overall, she never cared about our feelings either. After she was done, she came hugging me as well, and I told my ex-wife she should leave us alone once and for all. If she ever shows up here again, we get a restraining order. She left with tears in her eyes. Well, that was 3 days ago and she hasn't showed up again so far. I just hope she leaves us alone. My daughters made it very clear they don't want to have anything to do with her. I wanted to give them the opportunity to meet their mother again because if there is any chance that my children have a mother again, I don't want to stay in their way. But I'm glad they didn't give her the chance. I don't know if it makes me a bad person to think this, but I also don't think that my ex-wife deserves to be with her daughters again, so I hope the last encounter delivered the message. My traitor lesbian ex went to get the milk and just came back 3 years later. Her dumb lesbian face came around again. But luckily, not at home. I think about what's the best way to describe what happened today. Let's just say it could also be a part of one of those poorly written stereotypical drama series. My younger daughter came home today with a mad look on her face, and when I asked what was wrong, she started to explain. It all started when my younger daughter got out of school today. Usually, she just walks home, but this time my ex-wife waited for her at the exit. She tried to ghost her, but she was stubborn and refused to let her go just like that. She offered her a ride home. My daughter refused, but she insisted. She prepared herself for running away, but before she could, my ex-wife made her an offer. She would give her a ride home and would try to explain everything to her, and if she still didn't want to see her again, she'll never show up again. My daughter figured that this could be the best opportunity to get rid of her, so she accepted. Now here comes the interesting part. She wouldn't drive her home exactly, she just drove around the town for a while telling her story. According to my daughter, she broke up with her girlfriend after 1 year of her relationship with the coworker because they had too many different interests. She said that while she tried to live her life, she constantly had her daughters in her mind. She said she went no contact because she deleted the numbers and she hoped that this would help her start a new life with her girlfriend. She spent the last 2 years in a depression because she figured she couldn't live without her babies around, that she deeply regrets leaving them and that her life was a total mess. She could understand if my daughters hated her, but she would try to make everything right if they just gave her the chance. And then my daughter basically how I met you mothered her and asked her what would have happened if her relationship and her life were successful and if she and her older sister were just the consolation prize. Quick intervention from me at this point. I was so proud of my daughter at that moment. She is 13 and yet she is so mature and intelligent. I love her. My daughter told me that this question made her really mad and apparently she accused me of poisoning them against her. Funny because I never talked badly about her with my daughters. Of course, I was angry for a long time, so I said a few bad things about her to my coworkers but never to my daughters. She is still the mother of my children overall. My daughter said that when she got out of the car she affirmed her will to never see her again, and my ex-wife just nodded and then she drove away. My daughter asked me if we could do anything so she could stay away because she doesn't expect her to keep her promise. I called for my older daughter and my younger daughter explained to her what happened as well. Then I asked them if I should get the restraining order and I explained to them what that would mean and what would happen then, and they said yes. So yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. What is the most uncomfortable way you found out someone had a crush on you? I was in my second year of uni and lived in the dorms. It was right around Halloween. The guy was someone I'd met at my quad's Halloween party. We talked a little, but I spent most of my time talking to friends, a lot of it making plans for where we were going to go for our after party. Guy and I made plans to meet up in a few days for lunch. Over the next few days, I keep finding notes on my door. Nothing too bad, but just enough to weird me out. Stuff like "you have a beautiful laugh," when normally the notes people left on my door were more along the lines of "grabbed, X, from the C-store for you," or "can I borrow your mixing bowls?" I was one of the few people in my building with some cooking supplies since my stress relief is baking. Anyways, I came down with this nasty stomach bug. Puking my guts out and trying not to turn into a diarrhea fountain. It hit the night before the lunch meeting with the guy and lasted about 36 hours. Sent the guy a message saying I was sick and could we reschedule for another time, maybe on the weekend. Never got a response, but a few hours later, I heard a knock on my door. The guy proceeded to sit outside my door for several hours, trying to get me to let him in. The first 20-ish minutes or so, it seemed sweet, but when I left at one point to run to the bathroom, it didn't end up being nearly so sweet. He went into my room and was making himself comfy in my bed. When I came back, he held his arms out and said he'd make everything better. Yeah, no. Got my RA's boyfriend who lived in her room with her to help get the guy out. Guy stayed away for about an hour, aka until the RA's boyfriend left for work, and spent the next several hours just sitting outside my room, blocking the doorway and leaving me feeling trapped in my room. Eventually he left. I felt so nervous going in and out of my room for a couple of weeks afterwards though. Quad staff/uni police were not at all helpful. My RA and her BF had my back and I was on good terms with a lot of the guys in my building. 3/4 of the building was male, which is what ended up helping me the most. RA and BF kept an eye on my room and my RA would text me if she saw the creeper on our floor. My guy friends had the same/similar classes as me, so I always had at least one person who was willing to walk with me on campus near our quad, and we usually went to lunch/supper in groups of 3+. Still, it took until about Valentine's Day for the creeper to finally leave me alone. My ex has nude photos of his sister. My ex has nude pics of his sister and I think he wants to blackmail her to get their father's home after he dies. I also obtained the photos at one point and I'm not sure if I should share them as proof, delete the photos and tell her anyways, or move on and don't look back. My ex, Jake, and I broke up back in September of 2021. He was a complete jerk, and I should have ended it much sooner than I did. He would gaslight me, bled me dry financially, and near the end even tried to force himself on me. I left a few weeks later and can't even begin to describe how much I hate him for what he put me through. Roughly a year before we ended it, he was on 4chan. He is obsessed with the horrible side of the site, if that highlights what a creep he is, and someone posted a picture of a topless girl, but she was covering her breasts in the photo. He immediately realized it was his sister. Apparently there is a game that they play on that site, where the author will say if the stamp on your comment is a certain number I'll post the pics, 711 in this case. Jake tried twice, and he hit the number. The pics were then posted, 3 full frontal. He thinks his sister, let's call her Jen from here on out, was dating someone in college, did a video stream, and the guy did a screen grab. He thinks that happened about 5 years prior to the pics being shared online. He also thinks that the guy in question around that time is Jen's current husband. He was the only one to his knowledge that she was dating. Jake thinks he may have uploaded the pictures. Jen and her husband have a very difficult marriage. She wants to be a stay-at-home mom and her husband works tirelessly to keep up with her demands. All of this is, besides Jen's clearly troubled marriage, just a theory. I have no context outside of his guesses. He saved the pictures to his phone, and I was immediately freaked out. I told him to delete them. It was bad enough they had been uploaded to the internet and the post at that point had vanished, so it wouldn't be a simple task of reporting it. He refused. He said he may need the pictures at some point, and I had no way of getting the pictures deleted myself, so I figured I would keep trying to convince him to do the right thing over time. At one point I forgot about the photos while dealing with the rest of his BS. He broke his phone screen one day and needed help saving his data, so I let him upload everything to my Microsoft 365 drive that I never use and re-download everything back to his phone. Keep in mind, I had forgotten about the pics. Jake and Jen are the only 2 children. Their parents divorced when they were young but both stayed in their lives. Jake's mother divorced her very abusive father and decided to seek treatment for the trauma he caused her. She lost custody of them to their father and spent the next 10 years working on herself, therapy, anxiety meds, everything. She was not this broken person before she met their father. I met her and loved her so much. Compared to the stories I was told about her neglecting her children, she was 1000% not what I imagined. She wished she could have been more involved in her children's lives. She saw them every weekend, but she knew she couldn't mentally handle being there like they needed. She also works tirelessly to connect with them now as adults. Their father, essentially, spent those 10 years pitting them against each other, brother against sister, children against mother. Jake followed in his father's footsteps of being an abusive and manipulative person. Jen became obsessed with being daddy's perfect little white picket fence daughter, got married right out of college and immediately started pumping out grandkids. They both still treat their mother very poorly. Jen is also a terrible person, and treated me horribly during the few times we interacted. I love trying new things, I ride motorcycles, and I am very much a social butterfly. Their extended family adored having me over and would insist on me being invited to family events. During those events Jen never hesitated to try and make my pursuits of happiness, starting a business, building a home from the ground up, getting a dog, traveling more, etc., look like childish and reckless pipe dreams, while talking shit behind my back. Sidebar, after I broke up with Jake I accomplished everything I wanted. Suck it, Jen. We were in no way friends. Now, Jake and Jen's father has far more debt than he has cash, but he does have a house. The father has already said he would give the house to whoever had kids first. Classic, which is Jen, who is now on her 3rd child. She already has a house of her own and so does Jake. Jake didn't really bring this up when Jen started having kids, but any time his father brought up how the handover of his home would go, Jake became oddly quiet. Flat out, a part of me thinks he wants to use the pictures to blackmail Jen into handing over the house after his father dies. I moved out and I recently started receiving alerts from Microsoft 365, the look back on this moment kind of emails that send picture flashbacks. At first I didn't recognize the photos, and then it all came back to me that Jake had saved the forgotten pics to my account and must have forgotten to clear his data after he used it. But that means, now I have the pictures too. Now, like I said, I don't like Jen in the slightest, but I would never even dream of trying to use these pictures against her in any way, even though she treated me like shit. She may have been horrible, but I am not that kind of person. I don't think anyone should have nudes of another person without their knowledge. But what do I do now? If I just told Jen, she wouldn't believe me. A part of me doesn't care if she does, but a bigger part of me knows I won't be able to shake this haunting feeling that my ex is just waiting to blackmail her, and if I don't have proof, he's going to destroy her family for something she did when she was younger. I have no love for this woman, but that is pretty fucked up. The other part of me wants to delete the photos, tell her, and let her decide whether she wants to believe me and pursue it, or ignore me entirely to her own peril. The last part of me says this isn't any of my damn business, and even if I'm trying to help I could cause the exact same fallout as her brother by revealing what I know, proof or no proof. So, what should I do? Tell Jen and share the proof? Tell Jen and delete the photos? Delete the photos, move on with my very happy life, and just hope I forget about this over time like I did before?
I took my niece in when her mother kicked her out, and she paid me back by trying to sabotage my wedding, so I served her karma on her wedding day. My sister and I never had the best relationship. She's 15 years older than me, so maybe we didn't have much of a connection, and she's always been resentful towards me. She's treated me like an outcast and would often turn her kids against me and encourage them to insult me, disrespect me, and treat me like dirt. My mom would always tell me to be the bigger person, so I would always forgive them when they apologized or acted nice again. During COVID lockdowns, my sister and her husband kicked her out because my sister was having many mood swings. She has 4 other children and got them to participate in kicking out my niece. She called me, and I quickly went to pick her up. I met her on the curb with trash bags and my sister refusing to open the door, so I took her to my home, where she stayed for 6 months, and she even secured an apartment. Once my niece, 20, got her apartment, my sister and her husband convinced her to move back in, and my niece did. Then the same niece turned on me, and I felt very sad because she was in my home, and I did everything for her when her mom discarded her like trash. Fast forward to 2021, she does the same thing with her 16M son, and he called me. And again, I picked him up and let him stay. At the time, my now husband and I were planning a wedding, and of course, regardless of our differences, there was no way I couldn't invite my sister and her kids. Also, it was at the height of COVID restrictions, so we were very limited, and the church only accepted close family. When I invited my sister, she and her kids ridiculed me. My sister even said that my attitude was too disgusting to get married, and they're not coming because I don't deserve to get married. They even blocked me, except my niece, who promised she'd be there and promised to act as a witness. The day of, she didn't show up. There was no call and nothing. Thankfully, the photographer was nice enough to be our second witness. My mom called my niece, asking why she did this. My niece said, "I don't even know what kind of wedding it is. I don't see the point in all this," and then hung up. I was broken and in tears. My sister put them up to it, but I thought my niece would have risen above it, given all I've done for her when my sister, her mom, did what she did to her. I moved on, but I vowed never to speak to them again. My husband and I are happily married, have a new baby, and thrive in our business. Now my niece has met someone, and she's getting married. My mom told me to mark my calendar because we're going. I refused and reminded her of what they did at my wedding. My mom told me to stop living in the past and be the bigger person. I even cried to her, and she gave me a blank stare and then said to me that no one thinks about her and that I'll regret my actions when she dies. She says I'm being incredibly selfish, bitter, and shocked that I'm not over it. I'm still refusing to go. Then I got a call from an unknown number. It was my niece. She sounded very friendly and seemed like nothing had happened between us. She then proceeded to tell me she was sorry for not being able to attend my wedding and that, even so, she hoped that I would attend hers. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. She then called me several times that weekend, at some point, hinted that they needed more funds for the photographer. I told her not to worry, and I will book for her. I told her I would assure them she had the best photos in town because I would hire the best. She said thank you and ended the conversation. On the wedding day, I booked a flight for our family for a vacation and told no one. Many people have been calling me, but I have blocked them all. I then got a call from my niece asking where the photographer was. They did not even ask where I was. She was concerned with the photographer. I told her, I don't see the point. You'll probably separate in 2 weeks, so why take a picture of your union? She threw words at me, but I only hung up.
Teachers, what's the trashiest thing you've seen parents do? I volunteer at after-school programs to help tutor. I had a student earlier this year. Good kid. Loves math, loves computers. Wants to be a programmer when he grows up. He's really struggling in 7th grade because he has no computer at home. We have to do his online assignments at the program, but we only meet twice a week. I pulled his mom aside and explained how he could be doing much better in school with some kind of PC and internet access at home. She says she can't afford a computer. I tell her that for $200 I could piece all the parts together myself for a fully functional setup that would be sufficient for at least the next few years. I'd even build it with him so he could learn some extremely valuable information. I'd even front her half, but she'd have to pay me back. She says no way, still way out of her budget. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, she's barely looking up to speak to me. Too busy scrolling through the gram on her iPhone X. I say F it, I'll do it myself. Scrap together all of the parts I can for free. I only had to buy an HDD. The setup was really out of date, but still worked. Gave it to them. Kid was thrilled. About a month later I notice he's trying to finish all his HW at the program again. I ask his mom if everything's okay with the computer. She says it broke down. I say okay, what happened? I'll pick it up and try to fix it. She says she had to throw it away. I pull the kid aside and ask him. He tells me she sold it to her cousin for $50. I really don't like calling people trashy when they're apparently stuck in a culture of poverty. Maybe she needed that $50 for the light bill, or groceries. But at the same time she spends 3x that amount on her cell phone each month, so it really just broke my heart. It was like she's doing everything in her power to ensure the kid has no effing chance at a decent life.
My manic friend used her pregnancy as an excuse to do something sinister. You probably heard this on the news or something. Jane has been my closest friend since we were 7 years old. She probably knows more about me than anyone else in the world, even my parents and partner. We've always been like siblings and stayed together when our other friends drifted away. She was my biggest supporter when I was abused by an ex-partner. I was her biggest supporter when she dropped out of university because of her depression. If I had nobody else, I always had her. Everything had been fine until I found out she was pregnant. I was shocked because she didn't have a partner I knew about and she's really young, and she also didn't tell me. I was suspicious for a while because she was often sick and had gained weight, but I didn't want to point it out since she's always been thin. Eventually I confronted her and she admitted that she was almost 7 months, but she only recently found out. I called bull in my head because there was no way you could think a pregnant belly was normal weight gain. How did she not feel the baby kicking or her missed period? But I was there for her. I should have talked to someone because I was worried that she was so in denial, but I didn't. Before and after she told me she was pregnant, she was way more manic than she had been before. She would call me in the middle of the night and start a normal conversation like it was the middle of the day. She would say weird things about herself and her family, but she's always had a morbid sense of humor and they were never scary or threats. I keep looking for hints that she was going to do this, but I can't find anything other than the pregnancy did something to her brain. Jane has a younger sibling who was her parents' surprise baby. We never spent a lot of time with sibling because of the age gap, but I knew from being at the family's house that they had a nut allergy. Jane joked about it a lot because it was annoying to keep their food separate. I still don't know a lot of details because either Jane won't say anything or the police won't, but I found out through her parents that her sibling had died from an allergic reaction. It was from peanut butter that the parents hadn't bought, and Jane was the only other person in the house, and nobody knows if she tricked them into eating it or force-fed them, after hiding their EpiPen. I don't know what happened, but the police took her in and they haven't let her go. I feel sick because it wasn't an accident, she unalived them. Her parents say she must have been trying to prove they were really allergic, but that doesn't help her. She still did it on purpose and they can't prove she wasn't trying to kill them. She hid the EpiPen, it must have been planned, she knew they would die without it. She's 9 months pregnant and probably in prison right now. I don't know if her parents will keep her baby. None of this feels real and I can't breathe.
Dear Reddit, what is your all-time most embarrassing moment? Was on an airplane years ago with my girlfriend and her parents. My girlfriend couldn't get a seat next to me and sat directly behind me. During the flight I thought I would surprise her and reached my hand back onto her knee. Slowly I kept extending it up her thigh until I heard giggling. Looked behind through the seats and saw that my hand was on the leg of the guy next to her. He saw my face and said, "I just wanted to see how far you'd go." Of course my girlfriend was in on it and started laughing along with the rest of the row. Was so embarrassed. I hit face first into a streetlight lamp post because I was staring, while walking, at a beautiful girl walking towards the direction where I am coming from. It was in front of the main gate of our university. Hundreds of students saw it. My friends laughed hard as hell.
I'm putting my extremely disabled 7-year-old into a residential facility so I can forget he exists. I'm not sorry. I can't tell anyone this, even my therapist. Judge me if you want and maybe I even deserve it. I only ask what you would do if you were in my situation. Not what you think people should do. What would you really do? I'm a single mom of 2 boys. 12 and 7 years old. My husband passed away 3 years ago in a work accident. A very large portion of me believes he did it on purpose. I can't see him ever making the mistake he made that caused his death. Especially since he had taken an action just before that ensured his co-workers weren't in the room. I fully believe he killed himself because of our younger son, and no one will ever change my mind. We were told when I was pregnant that he would have Down syndrome. We could handle that. Even if it was severe. However, it turned out he had a chromosome deletion. His disorder is kind of rare, so I won't say which specific one, but suffice to say he'll never be anything more than he is now or has ever been. And what he is nothing. He doesn't appear to have any awareness and never has. His eyes are locked in one position. He doesn't respond to noise, touch, or pain. He is total care. He is capable of nothing. He is tube-fed and on oxygen. He is in diapers and will be forever. He makes no sounds and no attempts to communicate. He never even cried as a baby. He has never made an attempt to interact with anyone or his environment. I'm not upset because I have a special needs or imperfect child. I feel the way I feel because this thing takes up 200% of my time and does nothing. I didn't just get an imperfect child. I didn't get a child to begin with. I don't love him. He doesn't have any personality, so there is nothing to love. And yet I'm responsible for him. In addition to his extreme delays, he's also medically fragile. Respiratory crises, fecal impactions, and issues with his G-tube. He also gets infections and pressure sores no matter what we put him on or how we position him. Our older son has suffered because his non-existent brother has colored everything in his life. He's had medical care get delayed because his younger brother's critical condition takes all my time. We do have a visiting home nurse, but she's only here for 20 hours a week. We aren't eligible for more. I was starting law school until I gave up my dreams and my plan for my children for this potato. My older son can't do a lot of things he wants to do because of the youngest need for care and appointments. The final straw was when I heard a sound. I went into my younger son's room to check what had happened, thinking he had forgotten how to breathe again. That's when I saw my older son choking him and screaming, "You're why I don't have a mother. You're why I don't have a father. You're why I can't have friends over. You're why I can't be in sports. I didn't ask for you and I hope you die." Instead of being horrified, I watched. My younger son just did not react. No signs of pain or fear or upset. No reaction at all. He breathes, but he is not alive. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who my older son is. He has no sense of self, life experience, or awareness of his surroundings. This boy's not a gift. He is a genetic mistake who should not be in this world. And the flip side is, if he has awareness, he's miserable. And there is nothing I can do. If he has likes and dislikes, no one knows what they are. If he is in pain, he can't tell anyone. If he wants anything, he can't communicate. He's had every imaginable therapy, nothing has made a difference. And so he's leaving our home on the 29th. I feel excited and relieved, but then guilty because I know we'll be happier with him gone. I don't think my husband could ever muster the words "I don't want my son in my home." Now, my older son is my priority. I just want to never think of his little brother again, and for that, I'm not sorry.
My golden child sister broke my new phone that I bought for myself because I didn't buy her one too, so I sold her MacBook and kept the money. My sister is the golden child of our family, and it has been this way since she was born. My parents always wanted a girl, and rejoiced after finding out that my youngest sibling was going to be one. I on the other hand was a boy who came first, and was a failed termination. My parents both have always preferred my little sister. Although they have never said this outright, their actions make it very, very clear. I am currently 16 and my sister is 14, and my parents have already bought her a car and my dad is teaching her how to drive. As early as I can remember, my sister's achievements and special occasions were always more celebrated. She got presents on my birthday, she got to choose the cake on my birthdays, she got to pick all the family events we did. If we ever went to the movies as a family, like we did one year for my birthday, my sister got to pick the movie. I remember that day very well. Avengers Endgame had just come out, and it was all the rave at the time. I was 12 at the time, and desperately wanted to see it. However, my sister objected and wanted to go watch the Lego movie. After some back and forth, which was really just my parents telling me to be the bigger person and let her have her way, we ended up going and watching the Lego movie. One thing that hurt a lot was how much my sister relished in the favoritism of my parents, and used whatever chance she could to wrong me and let me know that our parents would always have her side. Things like her snitching on me for things I didn't do only for me to get in trouble were common. I gave up hope that they would change 2 years ago, when my parents went to a museum with my sister instead of attending my middle school graduation. That night really did break my heart, but I suppose in a sense it was necessary too. It was the day I stopped expecting anything from my parents and started working for everything myself. Stuff like this has been happening all my life, and it is a big reason as to why I'm not close with my family at all. Nowadays, I would describe my sister and my parents as my roommates. A main issue that I currently have is my sister's behavior. The years of getting spoiled and treated like a princess by my parents have led to her becoming unbelievably entitled. She expects her birthdays to be very lavish, she expects to always have the newest technologies, and clothing. She owns a Gucci bags. Well, the one thing which she doesn't have is the newest iPhone. That is something I have, or rather had I should say. You see, I've been working a part-time job for the last year and a half and I've been saving as much as I can. Up until 2 weeks ago, I still had an iPhone 6, which was my first ever phone my parents bought me at 14. I had saved up way more than enough money to buy the latest iPhone, and that's exactly what I did. I remember coming home from the shop, new phone box in hand, very excited for my new purchase. I managed to use it for about a day uninterrupted, when I heard my sister complaining about me having it. Why do you get to have a new phone when I'm stuck with this old piece of crap? She asked me. The old piece of crap she was referring to was her iPhone 13. I told her because I worked for it, and I saved up for it, and I decided to buy it for myself. My sister proceeded to ask me why I didn't get her one. I was sort of expecting this from her, so I responded by telling her that her current phone is still new, she did not work for a new one, and shouldn't expect me to get her one. She was of course not satisfied, and in a classic move for my sister, went upstairs to tell our mother about it. I knew what was about to happen, and I mentally prepared myself for the argument that was about to ensue. My mother came down a minute later asking me why didn't I buy my sister a new phone, and I proceeded to tell her the same thing I told my sister. She was not happy, and told me that family buys things for each other. I then asked her if that's the case why did she get my sister a car at 13 and despite me being 16 I still haven't received one, and she said it's because my sister doesn't have a job. I called bullcrap Van in there and told my mother I am sick of the blatant favoritism that occurs in this house every single day. That I'm tired of my sister being treated like royalty while I'm treated like a peasant, and if they actually expect me to spend my hard-earned money on a new phone for my sister, they must be insane. My sister and my mother ganged up on me, demanding I buy her a new phone, and the argument ended with me heading out of the house to go for a walk. I came back a few hours later, only to be greeted with another argument, this time from my dad about how I should get my sister a new phone. I did not engage in it however, and went upstairs to sleep. For the next week, I was constantly berated into buying my sister a new phone, and each time I refused, my sister especially, got more and more angry. She even screamed at me once, a literal scream, that I'd better buy her the new phone. She even threatened to break my phone or throw it at a wall unless I bought her a new one, but these threats of her I took as empty as I figured there was no way she would actually go through with it. Well, 6 days ago or so I woke up to my phone not at my bedside, as well as a smashing noise downstairs. I knew it was only my sister and I in the house. Both of my parents had worked despite it being the weekend. I went down to see what the noise was about and there I saw my sister. My phone was on the table, getting repeatedly hit with a hammer. By the time I saw it it was already totally destroyed beyond repair, and when my sister saw me she laughed and said, "Oops, that was an accident. Maybe you should have bought me a phone after all." I looked at her in pure disappointment and told her I no longer see her as my sister, and proceeded to pick up what was left of my phone and go upstairs with it. I tried my best to turn it on but it was in vain. She had totally destroyed it. Later that day I told my parents what happened but they didn't believe me, as my sister told them that I just dropped my phone. As if dropping my phone results in it completely shattering. Either way, my parents refused to do anything about it, and because there was no cameras in the house and no proof my sister destroyed it, I could not go to the police about it. It was around that time that I had enough. The same night while she slept, I took her brand new MacBook and listed it for sale, undercutting store prices by a decent amount. The MacBook was barely touched, she doesn't use it often and therefore it was in great condition. The next day I managed to get someone interested in the MacBook and I sold it. I did it all without any of my family members noticing. I managed to sell the MacBook for very close to the amount I paid for my phone. I also researched phone repairs, and it was somehow possible to repair my phone. It would cost a lot, but less than a new phone, and less than the amount of money that I got for my sister's MacBook. I'm going to go down to the repair shop in a few days. What's glorious about this whole situation is that my sister has yet to notice that her MacBook is missing. That's how entitled she is. She doesn't even notice that her latest MacBook has gone missing because she doesn't even use it. My family and I are not speaking currently, and I'm more than happy about that. Thanks for watching.